run anymore. 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970. You could also tweet us at Boss Public Radio. What do you think, Jared?
Well, it is a complete disgrace because we've been talking about this for decades. I mean, this comes as a surprise to absolutely no one that we've had problems with our trains, that we've had safety issues and functioning issues in all manner of weather. Usually we're having this conversation in the winter when they shut down. But now we recognize that the feds have come in and have ordered all of these changes, which means the T is now slowing down service so that they can address the changes, which apparently aren't being addressed because they need things like dispatchers, they need things like certification, which would make us all feel better when riding the T. And none of that's going to happen, at least by the end of the summer, we're now being told. And then you have to worry about runaway trains and trains catching on fire and all manner of discord.
Well, I'm happy to notice that the Green Line apparently is running in some fashion now, because I haven't been following the buses, down Beacon Street and Commonwealth Avenue that have been replacing the Green Line for these last days. But Jennifer Thompson Sullivan, she was one of the riders in the Orange Line. She should have a column in the Globe. This woman is a great writer and a great translator of the travails she has suffered as a 30-year MBTA rider. She wrote this for the Globe, and she talked about how in any given day, because she's put up with this for a long time, you never know when you're going to wind up at work. There could be police action. There could be medical emergencies. There could be disabled trains, switch problems, exploding train batteries, solar flares, or electrical fires. Any day, the conductor could kick you off the train, and often they never tell you why they're kicking you off the train. Just say, get off the train, you got to walk. Kick you off the train. They herd you, if you're lucky, into a shuttle. And then you have to worry about explaining this to your boss. Is your boss going to believe you that yet again you can't get to work on time because you have been stuck on the T? And this has been going on. I rode the T a lot years ago, mostly the Green Line. And the Green Line was slow if you did, unless you did the D line, which is the Reservoir line, which is the best line on the T. It was slow, but it generally worked. But this has just reached a new height of total disaster.
You didn't even read my favorite line from that piece,
What's
by
your
the way,
favorite
again
line?
from Jennifer Thompson Sullivan. Thursday's train fire wasn't my first time at the burning train rodeo. None of this is new. People are so accustomed. I mean, other people have talked about that you now have to allot for at least probably double the commuter time in order to get the class on time or to get to your job on time, or you call your boss and your boss is totally fine with that excuse because they know it's true.
Well, she also described how some kind of that they were struggling. The people on the Orange Line were trying to get out, and they went down to open the emergency door, frenzied attempts. They couldn't open the emergency door. They didn't understand if they were supposed to pull a ring or then a lever or recite some incantation. And then some heroic rider grabbed the overhead rails and swung his entire body, feet first, to the nearest window panel so people could climb out the window. And then you had a choice. Did you want to stay in the Orange Line and worry about being burned, or did you want to jump out of the train and worry about being electrocuted?
Right. Yeah, that's perfectly normal. That's what your T-Pass gets you. By the way, very expensive T-Passes for a lot of workers, too.
Exactly.
Who need to rely on this to get to work, and they're not.
877-301-8970. Let's start with Greg in Burlington. What do you think, Greg?
Oh, God, it's so bad. I take the commuter rail every day, and I feel like I'm taking my life in my own hands if I get on the T. My sister mocks me about it every day. She thinks she's a comedian, but she's more of a mean girl. And, she is more successful than me. She all the time, why do you put yourself at risk every day? And, it's nuts to me that I do this. But, every day I think it's getting worse. It somehow does. Like my friend Justin's performances, they just keep getting worse and worse and worse.
Greg, why do you feel like your life is at risk? Anything specific that you encountered on your train ride?
Marjorie, did you see that T, that train that exploded? I mean, that was so bad you wouldn't put it on a Swedish TV show.
Okay, Greg. We got kind of a bad connection, but thank you. Thank you very much for the call. This is Amber from Worcester who says, I only use the Worcester-Framingham line, but all the recent problems did make me nervous last Friday. Oh, she came to see BPR right here at the Boston Public Library, and on her way back on the T, there were a few times the train had to stop suddenly because a door somewhere was not closed. Yikes.
I hope everybody made it home that day.
It didn't used to be this bad,
No.
right? It didn't.
Well, I think there's just so much more scrutiny now, on top of the fact that, probably a lot more things are happening. And to the T's credit, they had been addressing these problems. There are new trains that are supposed to be coming online. They haven't come online yet. Of course, when they do come online, some of them they've had to take off because even the brand new trains aren't built to satisfaction, or there are mechanical problems there. So this is just completely beset. Long story short, people don't have a reasonable expectation that this is going to be resolved anytime soon.
Marcela Garcia, who's often with us on the radio here, she is a columnist for The Globe, and she also wrote a great piece today talking about how you can't have nightlife in the T, not just for the revelers who are out partying, but for people who work in the restaurant business, because the train closes so early. I think the last train is at 12:30, is it?
12:30, before last call.
Yeah, so you can't, you either have to leave really early, or if you work there and you can't leave really early, what do? Do you take an Uber to Lynn? I don't know what you do. You can't afford to park because it's so expensive to park here, so you're really kind of stuck. A few years ago, though, they did do extended hours. I don't know that it went that well.
There was the Night Owl bus service, which they tried, and then it was supposed to be a pilot program that they then took away. We have another texter here who's writing, Europe has older, narrower, and in some cases much colder transit conditions. Their systems are clean, safe, reliable, and efficient. The T is an embarrassment. I was just mentioning I was on vacation last week, and I was talking to somebody in San Diego who was very excited to be moving to Boston to take a job, very excited about the fact that there's public transportation. And I said, well, you might want to read the newspaper a little bit. Let me clue you into what's happening in Boston in the transit system here.
Well, even though New York, and when we talk about Europe, it is fair to say that some of those train systems, they've suffered in World War II, right? They had to build a lot of them, rebuild at least some of them after World War II. Ours are older. But New York City's is also right around on our wheelhouse, and they seem to go 1,000,000 times faster and have far fewer problems, at least in terms of people getting around New York City, because almost everybody takes the train, the subway in New York City, right?
For the brief time that I lived there, not one issue ever.
Dave from Somerville, thank you for calling.
Hi, Dave.
Hi, how you doing?
Fine, thanks.
So I was telling your producers that as a freelancer, it's pretty tough because, if you have a full-time job, then boss that you could call who might be understanding, as you mentioned earlier, Marjorie. But I'm teaching a workshop in East Boston in 2 weeks, and I'm kind of sweating how I'm going to get out there. I want to just be able to hop on the Green Line and make the transfer at Government Center to the Blue Line, but I just don't know if I'm going to get there on time. It's just so unreliable.
How long?
And the back.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just that the backup plan is to hop in a Lyft or an Uber, and that's my husband. He's a caterer, and that's his backup plan. We don't own a car, which how we've staved that off these years, we don't. But it's gone down.
Dave, we have another bad connection. I don't know if it's something we're doing or you're doing, but it makes you make an absolute great point, Dave, and thank you for the call, that you can't, if you're not someone who has a car, what are you supposed to do?
Well, from everything we were reading this morning, it seems the rule of thumb now is to just double the amount of time you expect to, normally it should be a 30-minute commute, give yourself an hour at least.
Yeah. You do wonder about the Red Line today. The Red Line train rolled 800 feet past the station with a brake issue. I mean, brakes do seem kind of fundamental.
You think?
Can you imagine if you got in your car and drove home and you went 800 feet past the place where you were trying to stop?
Actually,
that's a long way,
That's also a great analogy, isn't it? Because wouldn't you be stopped right away? And there would be ramifications for you right away.
Yeah.
What do we hear with the T? Yeah, we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully by Labor Day we'll work on something.
Exactly. I mean, who's ever heard of that? I guess brakes can fail, but usually you have some indication that they're going to fail, right?
Well, also in this moment of intense scrutiny, wouldn't you think that, going back to the language that Jennifer Thompson Sullivan was using, that the bucket of bolts was completely up to speed on all of its safety mechanisms?
Yeah, that's what she said in this great piece. And again, it's Jennifer Thompson Sullivan. She's a great writer. She said she was one of the passengers on the train, and she said, as Jared said, that many of the riders believed an explosion was imminent and being burned alive while trapped in a 40-year-old bucket of bolts was not an option we cared to explore. And that, of course, is why the hero in this story swang overhead from the rails and thrust his body against the window when, of course, they couldn't open the emergency door. That's another question. If there's an emergency door and you can't get out, what good is the emergency door in an emergency?
That's not very good. Let's go to John on the road. Hi, John.
Hi, Marjorie. Hi, Jared. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
Marjorie, Jared, I live in Malden.
Yeah.
So a whole stretch of, the orange line between Malden and State Street, I used to ride that for about 10 plus years. I drive now, so I don't have to worry about these things. But I do take the T every now and then. And I got to tell you, I was driving once from Malden to Wellington, and I seen a train sparking a lot, and it was like almost catching on fire. And this was a year ago. So these issues happen, a lot.
Yeah. What line would that have been from Malden? Would that be the...
Yeah, that was an orange lane.
Orange line.
Orange line.
Okay.
Yep, orange line. And one more thing. I'm Colombian American.
Yep.
In Medellin, they got up the metro running in 1999. They move double the amount of people that we move here on a daily basis, more effectively, in a timely manner. The trains are new, they're beautiful, they don't have these issues. Never have you heard of a train just rolling past the station because they couldn't stop. I mean, our GDP in Massachusetts alone is, probably higher than what they make in Medellin, in whole Colombia. So why are we having these issues? This is not India. We're not in in another country. We're not in Pakistan. Why are we having these issues?
John, that was a great call. I mean, you do raise, this is, after all, the United States of America, the richest country on earth, and we don't want to fix anything. I mean, I know it's very, very expensive. Billions of dollars to put in that Second Avenue rail in New York City. I think it was it $2 billion? It was some astronomical amount of money. But on the other hand, our infrastructure, as we all know, is falling apart. So we passed the first bill, Biden get in. He did pass that. That's a lot of money is supposed to come towards things like infrastructure, but it's not nearly enough. We're sort of an international embarrassment, John. Thank you for the call. You get off at Logan Airport and you think, if you're coming from another country, and you think, this is the United States of America here that I've just landed in.
It's incredibly frustrating, and also
stuck in the Sumner Tunnel, stuck on the Mass Pike.
We're not meeting our words. We talk about accessibility. We talk about climate change.
Yeah.
The T is something that is supposed to address both of those issues, and we can't even be on top of it. I think that is what's most frustrating. And we're trying to build this region, build this area still, and who wants to come here if they know that this is going to be an issue? I stopped really regularly taking the T a long time ago after I was late to a funeral because the red line broke down. Literally late to a funeral because of the red line. And I thought, why would I put myself in this situation again?
Yeah, and that is facing considerable traffic too, because if you're coming in or out of the city, almost any time of day now, even on the weekends, you're going 10 miles an hour down 93 until you get down to Braintree, practically, to get to the split where it goes 128 or Route 3 south.
And now we know, but thanks to Shirley Leung's column about the signs that have been created around the T, that you can, walk the T sometimes faster than walking, or as that same sign maker said, maybe the T sometimes faster than swimming.
Yeah, those are the protest riders, the signs that T riders were holding up when she solicited signs that they should put up. Well, remember the great story where I think they weren't even track stars. They were just regular 8-minute mile runners. You're a big runner. 8 minutes is not that fast, right? These guys get up.
I beg your pardon.
I'm sorry, but you're not running like a marathon runner. You're not running a 5 or 6 minute mile. So these runners met the Green Line up near Boston College somewhere, and they beat it to Coolidge Corner. They ran faster than the T. Now that's the worst line of all, the Boston College line. It stops every 2.5 blocks.
Yeah.
Maybe we wouldn't all have to go on diets if the T maybe went 6 blocks instead of 2.5 blocks. Paul and Braintree thinks Charlie on the MTA should be some gubernatorial candidate's campaign song. And Charlie Baker, of course, is the governor, and he has defended his work on the MBTA. And it is true there has been almost constant work on the T since Baker's got there. He has done something. But obviously, it's not enough. Russell in Dorchester. What do you think, Russell?
Hi, Russell.
Hi. So I'm like a lifelong T rider. I grew up riding it. I actually used to work in a bar downtown and I used to have to bike home because the trains didn't run late enough.
Yeah.
But I wanted to highlight, you've mentioned a couple times this international comparison, and I wanted to highlight there was an article that came out last month in Jacobin magazine called American Exceptionalism Off the Rails by Elizabeth Henderson and Jared Abbott, if people want to Google it, that actually does a great job of kind of walking through the differences in why people in the rest of the world are able to build infrastructure much more inexpensively than in the United States and more quickly and better. And basically they walk through the differences in the planning process, the differences in laws around litigation, because one of the things that slows down infrastructure projects a lot in the U.S., in Boston, but also in New York and anywhere else, is the constant threat of litigation and the fact that unions are included in a planning process. They specifically highlighted Spain, but in a lot of countries, so that there's not an adversarial role so much as a process where unions are actively involved as partners in the process. And that leads to Spain, for instance, they use as the example, having been able to build like high-speed rail, new subway systems in, cities that date back thousands of years and have all kinds of historical things and are very densely packed, but they're able to do these kinds of projects completely union, with good wages for the workers, but without the kinds of delays and cost overruns that we constantly see here in the United States. And public transportation works well and it's good. And if we were willing to spend more money and do things in a more rational way and put some limits on like the kind of frivolous lawsuits that happen and have a more like a process that really engage the labor movement as partners, there's no reason why we couldn't do that in the United States as well.
Yeah, well, one of the things, Russell, that I have read is that blue states where we have very strong unions are much more expensive to build in than red states which have less strong unions. And one of the issues in Massachusetts is it's very expensive to build almost anything. And I don't know enough about what this particular article you're talking about, but it is really true that there are lawsuits and there are very powerful unions here which do make it difficult. But Russell, one more question. You said you've been riding the T your whole life, so you're in Dorchester. Was the Red Line a little bit better when you were just starting out your excursions on the T, or what?
Yeah, certainly it was better. But I do want to highlight, I think that's a myth, the idea that unions make things more expensive. It's rather that unions make sure that people can have a decent life doing work and make sure that there's a level of professionalism. But what is highlighted in this article is actually the unions are even stronger in Spain, and because of that, they're treated as partners in the planning process instead of treated as sort of an inconvenience that has to be worked around.
Okay. And
because of that, they're actually able to have good jobs that provide decent livelihood to people.
Yep. We got you. We got you. Thank you very much for the call, Russell. We should take up his challenge and read that. Jacobin, I've seen that before, but I don't read it very much. Do you?
I haven't seen that piece, no. But we are taking your calls and your texts about more woes. Apparently, Marjorie has them all lined up and ready to go.
Paul wants to know if taking the T is going to make him late for his own funeral.
I think you can count on that. We're taking your calls and texts. That's next. Stick around. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Priced Out, the fight for housing in Massachusetts. We've been following the people and communities disrupted by the increasing cost of housing. And now we want to hear from you.
I was living in Fenway for the past 9 years, and every year my rent went up.
What's happening in your neighborhood? Are you being priced out?
My rent was $1,000 more a month than it was when I first rented the apartment.
Share your story or ask a question you'd like answered at gbhnews.org/priced-out.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the South Shore Irish Heritage Trail. You can travel into the past through 9 towns in Plymouth County. Learn more at ssirishtrail.org, funded by the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. We are talking about the failing, or failed, you might say, public transit system and how it affects you. If it's so unreliable, you switch to driving downtown. Are you facing the reality of massive parking costs? But if you must rely on the T, we want to hear from you too. Our number is 877-301-8970. You can call us or text us at this number. Bob from Rockland thinks the MBTA may still be pulled by horses. So slow and behind the times by 75 years. Another texter says, why do cars have state inspection, but the T can be unsafe all year round? I mean, we shouldn't say it's unsafe all year round. I mean, it does obviously have its problems, but so far I think that most riders do get off without injury on any given day, wouldn't you say?
They just don't know when they're going to get off. But so the reason we're talking about this is that a red line train this morning, or I think it was within the last 24 hours, accidentally rolled with one conductor on board at 800 feet. Remember that there was the Orange Line fire last week. Remember in May, there were 3 separate Blue Line derailments. And that was, I think, the case where we didn't even get full transparency from the MBTA. They weren't exactly telling us what was going on. It was the Globe that did some great reporting there so that we could figure that out. Not to mention the Federal Transit Administration coming in and finding a whole list of late recertification, delayed maintenance, lack of safety protections, inadequate staffing. I mean, this is a problem. They've been given the charge to bring in more people, and they can't find the people, so now they're trying to get retired people to come back.
Yeah.
It's just a complete mess.
You used to be able to retire from the T at 45. I think they've upped it now. And that's one of the reasons the T is in such financial trouble, is because they had these very early retirement ages, so that at one point there were more people not working for the T than were working for the T. Anyway, let's go to Molly in West Newbury. Hi, Molly.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Great, thanks.
I can't even imagine if the Olympics had gone through.
Right.
With the T, like, how would we transport these thousands and thousands of people with, are we helicoptering them? I can't even believe that we're like a third world city.
Yeah, that's a great question. Like the previous caller that talked about, all these other foreign countries that are broke.
Well, I mean, you frequently mentioned Greece.
Greece, broke.
And they have a fabulous system because of the Olympics, actually. But they knew how to do it. They knew how to prepare for the Olympics, and they carved out, literally, sometimes out of mountains and whatnot, they carved out this amazing public transit system.
And the airport in Greece, right? It's
beautiful.
Gorgeous in Athens. Molly, that's a great point. I don't know. Go ahead.
I don't know how Baker was so defensive the other day, and I found it a little annoying just to quote on-time departures and arrivals as opposed to these huge infrastructure cracks that he doesn't even really want to address. And that Jim was embarrassed that he only asked one question. I was screaming from my end, like, say something else. He just backpedaled. And I found it offensive that Governor Baker was so defensive on this atrocity. This is just embarrassing.
Also, we were embarrassed that we did not know the extent of the fire on the Orange Line at the time we went on the air, too, that people were having to kick out windows and dive off the train into the Mystic. We were unaware of that, or it might have been a different conversation, Molly. But thank you for the call. I mean, he has spent more money, I think, than any of our previous governors. I'm not sure about that, but I'm pretty sure he spent more money than any of our previous governors on the T. But it's just not enough. And it's
not only about throwing money at the problem. It certainly helps, but it's also about management here.
Right.
And that's what's not happening.
Right. Well, the feds are gonna take care of this. This is supposedly. This is Dominique, who says, I used to work in the Fenway. It would take me the same amount of time to walk, take the T, or drive home to Arlington. This makes no sense. Walk? Really, Dominic? Couldn't have taken it.
Well, maybe sometimes, if you walk fast.
Scott from Salem, what do you think?
Hi, Scott.
One of my favorite movie lines of all time is from the 1974 version of The Taking of Pelham 123. I don't know if you've seen
Yeah,
Ever
with
saw the film?
Walter Matthau, right?
Yeah.
Yes, Walter Matthau is the transit cop. He's trying to deal with Robert Shaw, who's hijacked the subway train, and he's trying to deal with the hostage situation. And the guy is sitting at the desk trying to run the system because the system's all screwed up because of the train being stuck on the track. And so he tells Walter Matthau, he says, "Why don't you just storm the train?" And Walter Matthau says, because they have hostages. And the guy looks at Walter Matthau and he says, "Well, what do these people want for the lousy 75 cents to live forever?"
Okay.
I can see why you would make that comparison.
Of course, the tea is not that cheap, though.
No, it's not.
It's way up over $2.
Well, that's
now,
one of the
isn't
most
it?
outrageous parts. For a large number of people who absolutely need the tea, it's a huge part of their income to pay for monthly passes for a service they cannot rely on.
Yeah, Michelle Wu maintains that the buses and some of the trains can be free for people and not undermine completely the budget, because that's not where their money comes from. That's her claim in any case.
All right, well, that is enough of the tea. Well, coming up, NBC Sports Authority Trenni Kusnierek is here at the Boston Public Library to talk to us about all things sports. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Next time on The World, a new American law may encourage China to stop forcing Uyghur Muslims to work against their will. U.S. companies now need to certify that their products are not made with forced labor from China's Xinjiang province.
So we're seeing sort of like a global effort to combat forced labor in the global supply chain, and it's not just a U.S. issue.
The Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Picasso, helping people buy and own a second home by bringing buyers together for co-ownership in an LLC. Picasso manages the home while clients own it. Information and current listings at pacaso.com. And Hopkinton Center for the Arts, presenting live band concerts Friday and Saturday nights starting at 6:30. Tickets and details on their Summer Arts Series at hopartscenter.org, funded in part by the Metro West Visitors Bureau.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. We are joined now by Trenni Kusnierek, anchor and reporter for NBC News Boston. Thank you very much for coming in, Trenni. Good to see you.
Nice to see you guys in person.
I know. It is nice, isn't it?
Well, my dog can now go in a crate, and she doesn't just pee on the carpet, so... I'm also scheduling a dog walker now so that I can come and then I don't have to be stressed and rushing, because she can do that now.
Yeah,
she's totally. I missed my live appearance because she as I was getting ready to go, I almost missed it all together because she just squatted and peed right in front of me on the carpet. She's like, I can't believe you're working and not playing with me.
It's very stressful. It's like having a baby. These puppies, very nerve-wracking.
She's getting there though. 28 pounds at the vet yesterday.
There you go. What kind of dog?
Golden Retriever.
Oh, Golden Retriever.
Well, now you can just turn on the radio and she'll think you're in the room with her.
So my fiance said yesterday for the first time, he pointed me out on TV and she started going crazy. And I was like, didn't happen unless you get video. I need to see video of that.
So she recognized you on television.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Well, that makes sense though,
yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. She knows, when I was gone, I was home for my bachelorette party, like a week and a half ago. And
was it a smashing success?
You know what, Marjorie? We had 15 girls. 15 from this side of the country, the West Coast and the Midwest. Everybody's from somewhere different. They're all kind of from different friend groups. There was no drama. Can you believe that? The first thing Sean asked me was so drama? And I was like, no, none. Everybody got along. Everyone had a good time. If you wanted to go to bed early and you didn't feel like partying till 3 a.m., you went to bed early and no one said anything. And Meredith Goldstein, one of the favorite guests of this show, she was out there with me. She sat at a floaty in the lake and sat on the lake floor, and she went on a UTV. Do you know what a UTV is?
I do not.
It's I forget what the utility terrain vehicle. So
is
it's
that like
like
an ATV,
so it's like
same
an
thing?
ATV, except for like you can drive it sort of like a car, but it's obviously got the big tires. I don't think it's as much fun as an ATV. Like an ATV, you can really like rip it, but you can also dump it.
Yeah.
But she put on that helmet and she got in that thing and she was like, "Let's go!" And she got all dirty and she loved it. And I was like, "Yes, Meredith,
These are all.
I'm turning you to the North Woods."
Was this in Wisconsin?
Yes, we went to Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yes.
Because I've never heard of those things, but I guess they're very common in Wisconsin. right?
They are. Actually, when I hiked up in Mount Washington, I don't know, maybe like a month ago, they had an ATV fundraiser where you drove your ATV up Mount Washington. It was all it's like Mount Washington's like one of their biggest fundraisers. Like people go and they raise money for the foundation and everything up there. It was So there are ATVs here. You can just go right north to. I'll take you, Marjorie. I can
Okay.
drive one well. I will take you ATVing.
And I will video.
And she's the bride to be. We're very excited about all. We want a lot of pictures of this
you will.
wedding.
You
Trenni
will get
Kusnierek.
it.
So let's get back to sports in Boston here. A lot of us were very, very excited by the Celtics this year. They came so close to winning the NBA championship. But what's going on with the superstar Kevin Durant? Durant.
Kevin Durant. I like Durant better, though. It
Yeah.
sounds fancier.
does.
Durantula, as they like to call him. So the Celtics are apparently, so he requested, I should start from the beginning. He requested a trade from the Brooklyn Nets. It's kind of been a mess there. A couple of years ago, he and Kyrie Irving had this conversation, like, let's go to a team together. Let's build a super team. So they went to Brooklyn. They both got paid a lot of money. And as it often happens when you join forces with Kyrie Irving, he is a crazy person and things started to fall apart. He, at one point, I think, wanted to request a trade or said he wasn't going to come back. And then, of course, he didn't get vaccinated, so it kind of screwed the whole team last year. And Kevin Durant, I think, just got finally tired of it and requested a trade from the Nets. And there was a lot of speculation about which team could afford the high price. And the Celtics were talked about. And it was sort of floated out there that maybe they could offer Jaylen Brown or a combination of Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart and other picks. And at 2:31 a.m. on Monday morning, Adrian Wojnarowski, Woj-bombed us at 2:31 a.m. and said the Celtics have emerged as frontrunners to land Kevin Durant. Shams Charania, who is the senior NBA insider for both The Athletic and Stadium Sports, which is based out of Chicago, follows up that report by saying, with details, that the Celtics had offered Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and then future draft picks in return for Durant. The Nets said, that's not quite enough. We also want Marcus Smart, more draft picks, and maybe another rotational player. And the Celtics balked at that. They said, that's kind of a lot. Let us go back to the drawing board. But there's a lot of posturing going on. And, I think what it says, at least what it says to me, is the Celtics are in win now mode. And while they know they can win with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, it's so hard to pass up even a third, in my opinion. Some people disagree with me, but I think that you have to make a run at Kevin Durant, even at 34 years old. He still averaged 30 points per game last year. I know he looked pedestrian at times against the Celtics and their defense neutralized him, but he is one of the best players to ever play in the NBA. He's still a top 5 player, even at 33, almost 34 years old. And I just sort of wonder if, Cedric Maxwell said this yesterday on Early Edition with me on my show and said, don't you think if they would have had Kevin Durant on the floor, they'd probably win the NBA Finals?
Yeah.
And so it's hard not to go after him. It's hard to part with a young star like Jaylen Brown, but nobody stays anywhere in the NBA anymore. Like, you can ask out. So go for it. To me, it's like, go for it. Just go for broke.
So how long does this play out?
Okay, it could play out, Jared, all the way until training camp.
What?
And training camp doesn't start till September 26th. So this could be yes, it could go back and forth because there's no hurry, right? There's no hurry to move him. There's nothing going on right now. It kind of doesn't matter. The Nets are going to try to get as much as they can, but as they get closer, and I'm sure what the Celtics are probably thinking is, well, if it gets to a point where nobody else can offer what Brooklyn wants, and Kevin Durant really doesn't want to play for Brooklyn, and he starts to suggest that maybe he just won't play, they may say, you know what, better to get something than nothing, and maybe they accept the Celtics' first offer. So, this could go for a while, which is great if you're in talk television and talk radio, because it gives us something to talk about.
Well, speaking of the NBA and something to talk about, LeBron James, absolute superstar in the NBA, he's got this HBO show. It's called The Shop. And here he is talking about racism he's faced from Boston sports fans.
Why do you hate Boston?
Because they racist as that's why. They will say anything, and it's fine. It's my life. I've been dealing with it my whole life. I don't mind it.
It seems like every few months somebody else is calling us or the fans. I'm not sure whom he's calling, but racist in Boston. What do you make of this?
So here's my issue, and I'm going to back this up by saying Gary Washburn. I'm sort of stealing this take from Gary Washburn, who was on early edition of my show when I was on vacation, but I happened to catch him talking about this very topic. And for those of you who don't know, Gary Washburn is black, so I sort of defer to him. I obviously don't experience racism. And he said that what LeBron James did not offer any specific examples of racism. He said the term he should have used is offensive. Boston fans can be offensive. They swear at you, they throw things at you. They're not quite Philly fans in how obnoxious they are, but they're pretty bad, right? They can be spirited. But he didn't offer, and to me, from my perspective, if he has a specific example of racism and how he experienced that here, then he should talk about it, and people should get called out, and we should be held to a higher standard. Like in a city that props itself up as progressive and accepting, and we're really trying to get further into that, there are too many stories still of issues that athletes and entertainers experience while they're here. But unlike, say, an Adam Jones, who used to play for the Baltimore Orioles, or Michael Che, who, of course, is a comedian, where they offer up specific instances and details of actual racism, LeBron James is just saying, well, they tell me to F off. Well, okay, that's not racist. It's offensive, and maybe it's obscene, but it's not racist. And to me, what that does is it harms other people who actually experience racism. Because now every time if someone here, a black person or any person of color, experiences racism in the city of Boston, if they're an entertainer or an athlete, and they come forward and talk about it, they go, oh yeah, just like LeBron, oh yeah, he couldn't even come up with a specific example. To me, that harms when someone actually does experience something. So if you're going to call a city racist, which is that's a big thing to do, right? Like, that's a really serious charge against an entire city and a fan base. You better have some real life examples to back it up.
Well, I thought it was interesting that he's literally invested in the city and the sports. I didn't realize that he's a part owner of the Red Sox.
He is.
I said to Marjorie before the show, how did we not know that?
Yeah, he is. He is part of Fenway, Roush, whatever it is, the sports group, which owns the Red Sox, Liverpool. I mean, he is part of this ownership group now because the Henrys, I think, have a real interest, or I shouldn't just say the Henrys, but Fenway Sports Group has a real interest in acquiring an NBA team, and LeBron would like to be an owner at some point. So, yeah, listen, again, if you experienced it, I personally want to hear about it. I want to hear your stories, and I want to know how we can come together. Like, what happened? How do we make it different? How do we make sure that it doesn't happen again?
Because we've been through this exercise before with racist fans.
Yes, we've been through it before, and I believe those people. Like, I don't think people make it up. What do you gain by making it up? But when you just come out and go, I hate those fans because they're racist, and then you say, well, what did you experience? And he said, well, they had a T-shirt that said F LeBron. Well, no offense, buddy, but you probably get that in every city you play in because you're the greatest player right now of this generation, and people either love you or hate you.
We're talking to Trenni Kusnierek from NBC Sports Boston. So there's something, Trenni, called the 135-mile Badwater race in Death Valley. And a gentleman named Bob Becker, who's 77, was the oldest official finisher, even though he didn't make the cut and even though he crawled the last few miles. Here's some sound from the crowd as he's crawling those last few miles, thanking the crowd, beer in hand, later when he finally does finish.
You hung out what time? 8 o'clock or something? Thank you, guys.
So 77, 135 miles.
And not just 135 miles. Like 135 miles, no matter what, if you're running it, is really impressive, right? Yeah. But it's 135 miles where you start at Mount Whitney and you finish in Death Valley. So you're losing tens of thousands of feet of elevation, and you're going from like cool, comfortable temperatures to the harshest heat in all of the United States. Like, what this guy did is incredible. And if you have a chance to see the video, it's a little hard to find. Like, you can see it on like some Facebook pages. I found it on, someone sent it to me, a friend of mine who I run with sent it to us on Instagram. He is hunched over and they're like helping him across. And on the Facebook post, they actually say a lot of people are asking about his health. Was he really okay to do this? He has finished, I think, 12 of these, including 5 in his 70s. So he is an ultra marathoner. Like, that's what this guy does. But what's so interesting to, or not, I guess not interesting, it's kind of sad to me. He got an official finisher's t-shirt, but Badwater, just, you know, probably for safety's sake and like people staying out there, you get like a belt buckle if you finish within 48 hours. You get a medal, and you used to get a medal if you finished within 60 hours.
Continuous, or do they get to stop and sleep?
No, you just gotta keep going. You gotta power through.
God.
I mean, some people I've read, like, you remember Dean Carnegie?
Oh, of course.
Like,
I read his book.
Yes,
yeah.
I feel like everybody at one point like read this guy's book, and then we're like, I'm gonna run 50 miles, and then you're like, no, that seems terrible. Like, he literally would talk about how he would just like sleep run. I think some do stop and take like power naps, like 15, 20 minutes, but you don't sleep like 8 hours. I don't think that that's like possible. I think you just have to push yourself through the limits. And people like it, right? Like, but this guy, I think it's so amazing, and that he sort of, and he's run this before, and he's finished fairly well before, and he's been like an official finisher before. And I just think that people sort of adopted him in the spirit of never giving up, even when he could barely walk at the end. Like, he could barely stand. And at one point he was like down dog crawling. Oof. Like, just trying, I think they said he was experiencing like side cramps, and he was just trying to get through it. But like, I think about, like, yesterday I did like a 4-mile run in the morning, and it was hot, and I was like, oh, it sucks, it's hot, this is terrible. And then there's like 77-year-old Bob being like, I'm just gonna down dog walk to the finish of a 135-mile race from a mountaintop to the desert, it's no big deal.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
had I seen that story before, I might not have complained yesterday.
But think about that, Boston Marathon is 26 miles, right?
Yes.
26.2.
26.2.
Don't forget that point too.
Yeah, that matters.
135 miles?
Yes. These ultra marathons, these ultra distance races are becoming more and more popular. Like, even Des Linden, who we all know, of course, won the Boston Marathon in 2018 in that terrible weather. Yep. She now has started to dip her toes into ultra marathons. She ran a 50K, which is about like 32, I think, or 33 miles. I don't really know. I did the conversion. And she set the record for it. I think she did it at like a 5:35 or a 5:40 pace, but it was like kind of just like flat trails. Like, this is, again, it's like undulating, and we talk about like Boston being hard because it's a downhill course. You're coming down from Mount Whitney into like below sea level. Like, that is so hard on your legs.
Dealing with all of those elevation issues, and then if you're a runner, you probably know that running downhill is a lot harder than running uphill.
Yeah,
it kills your quads and your legs. Yes. But he's just an incredible person. And I honestly was like looking for like a hard copy story on this and couldn't find one to send you guys. So I literally sent you like an Instagram link, but I thought this was such a great story. I wanted to talk about it.
Well, tell us about, I didn't even know about the World Athletics Championships in Oregon, but apparently there's this young American woman, Sydney McLaughlin, that's a real rising superstar. What's her deal?
Oh, she's an absolute star. So she actually won gold in Tokyo in the 400-meter hurdles. She has now broken her own world record. Correct me on this, Jared. Is it 7 times that she's already broken it this year? Either way, so. And I know it sounds crazy that she obliterated her previous world record. Her previous world record in the 400-meter hurdles was like 51 point something, and she ran 50.68. In the World Championship. So she broke that record by not quite a second, but almost a second, which, trust me, in speed, in short distance running, 1 second it's massive. It's huge, right? And she is just like she's crushing the competition. And she's the second youngest woman ever to consecutively hold a world record, an Olympic gold, and a world gold in an event. It's only happened one other time, and it was with a distance runner, I believe an Ethiopian woman. So she is just like, and she has it all, right? Like, she's got this like 1,000-watt smile. She's got a great personality. And then she actually, after going out and breaking her own world record, the world record she broke was her own. After breaking her own world record, she went out on Sunday, the final day of competition, and she anchored the the 4x400 women's relay, which won the United States their 13th gold of the World Championship and a record 33 medals overall, which also helped Allison Felix get her record 14th gold and 20th medal overall in American track and field, making her the most decorated American track and field runner of all time.
We've got some sound from her. She's 36 years old, right? She came out of retirement to run in the preliminary of the 4x400.
So it wasn't, well, yeah, I guess it was sort of retirement because this was going to be her last thing. But the best part is she was like eating like a cheeseburger and like having a root beer. And someone's like, hey, by the way, if you want to get another medal, you can come run in the prelims and then we'll have like different ones in the finals, just so she qualified. And she did.
I think maybe I was told we don't have the sound. Did somebody just tell me we do not have the sound? Maybe that's what they told me.
I think we don't.
We don't have the sound.
So the Americans did really well here, but we don't talk about the World Championships as like we talk about the Olympics. What does it set somebody up for?
Well, it sets them up, for the Olympics. It also just puts them on a greater stage. It's part of all, they call it the quad cycle, which is the 4 years that you sort of work towards. And I think the reason we're hearing about this, it's the first time it was ever in the United States, and it was held in Eugene, Oregon, where of course Prefontaine is sort of famous for, and it's where Nike is in Eugene, and they've got like this great track and field. But I don't think we hear about it because track and field is track and field, right? And you sort of only pay attention to it during the Olympics. Yeah. But the Americans are really dominant. Like Noah Lyles, who is right now like one of the fastest guys in the world, he broke Michael Johnson's 200-meter time by like 0.01 of a second. Like Johnson, I think, ran it in like we'll call it 2.0, and he ran it like 19.19. I'm not probably getting the exact numbers right, but I read it this morning to refresh my memory, and that clearly didn't work. But he is like a rising star. I mean, it's just, I think in Boston, everything we think about with running is distance running, which a lot of times East Africans dominate. But in short speed, in short distance running and sprinting, the Americans are really dominant. So keep an eye on these people, because a lot of them, like Sydney McLaughlin, she will defend her gold medals, and she will defend all of these titles and her world record in a couple of years, in 2 summers from now in Paris. And it's a much shorter cycle, right? Because normally you lose a year of training, which could benefit, because it's like less time to age in between, but also it's like doesn't give you the same amount of time to totally rest your body, because you also have these world championships in between. And there's not a lot of money to be made in track and field either. So when you do something like this, Jared and Marjorie, you become sort of a household name, or at least a household name in the sport, it opens you up to endorsements that allow you to focus completely on just training for your events. So she's sponsored by Nike. So if Nike is sponsoring you and you wear their apparel and their shoes, and they give you like an appearance fee and endorsement fees, that allows you for running to be your job, as opposed to trying to balance like running and a full-time job, which is really hard to do at the elite level.
So Trenni, we're almost out of time here, but in the minute or so we have left, tell us about the Red Sox.
They're terrible, Marjorie. They did win last night. They did beat the Cleveland Guardians 3-1. So they snapped their 5-game losing streak. They have now only lost 8 of their last 10 games instead of 9 of their last 10. I think that's how that math would work. It's just, Marjorie, listen, they've been hit by injuries, right? So they get Chris Sale back, and then he takes a second start back. He takes a comeback around the mound. It hits him in the pinky. His pinky's facing a different way. He may not even make it back after all that money they paid him and how many times he's gotten injured. Kike Hernandez is injured with I think a hamstring, along with Rafael Devers is now on the IL with a hamstring injury. Xander Bogaerts has a shoulder. But the bigger issue with the Red Sox right now is that for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's because he wants to buy an NBA team, but the Red Sox aren't investing in their players. Like Rafael Devers is one of the best young players in the game. Like, they should be paying him and wanting to keep him in Boston and making him like a David Ortiz face of the franchise. This is a kid who's been working on his English. He's been, oh my God, that's a huge fly. He's been working on his,
it is a huge fly.
Like, oh my God. I was like, that is like,
it's been chasing us all morning.
Is definitely from like Stranger Things. Yeah. That is like Vecna right there.
I think it's a drone, actually.
He's been working on his defense. He's been working on his English, because the knock on him was that he was only a hitter. I know.
Heading right
towards
you.
Oh my God, it like doesn't even fly.
Oh, I think it's an injured fly.
It's not afraid of anything.
Oh. I mean, I hate killing things, but
oh my God,
I think it is injured.
See the excitement
you
at the
just
library.
wounded it, Jared.
You know what? That wounded fly right there, like it can still move, but it can't do anything. That's the Red Sox.
Well done. Okay. Nice applause.
Trenni Kusnierek, thank you very much.
It's like a mic drop. I just have to leave now.
We have been speaking with NBC Sports anchor and reporter Trenni Kusnierek. Well, coming up, researchers at Harvard have reaffirmed the January 6th committee findings that rioters may have had varying reasons for showing up in D.C. on that day, but many were directly influenced, of course, by former President Trump's incitement and a desire to support him. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
It's not a
Support for our programs comes from you and Johnson & Wales University, helping to prepare graduates for impactful careers using a collaborative, interdisciplinary approach to learning. You can explore more at jwu.edu. Take an intimate look at the nation's affordable housing crisis through the eyes of tenants, landlords, judges, and law enforcement. Don't miss Frontline, Facing Eviction, tonight at 10 on GBH2.
I'm Callie Crossley of Under the Radar, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, we are broadcasting live today at the Boston Public Library. Researcher Joan Donovan of Harvard's Shorenstein Center has a new study cementing the role that former President Trump's online posts played in the January 6th insurrection. She'll detail it all. Then, will President Trump ever face accountability? For January 6th, we'll ask retired federal judge Nancy Gertner.
I'm Jared Bowen, and for Jim Browdy, after that, a new grocery store in Lynn is embracing its reputation as the City of Sin. We'll hear more from food writer Corby Kummer on that story and the end of the road for the Choco Taco. We'll also talk about the latest coming out of Washington with CNN's John King. That's all to come ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Former Vice President Mike Pence is in Washington, D.C., rolling out what he's calling his freedom agenda. NPR's Tamara Keith reports this afternoon, former President Donald Trump will also be in Washington for the first time since he left the White House.
The former running mates have been shadowboxing in a possible future race for the 2024 Republican nomination, with Pence making veiled references to moving on.
We need to lead America with a freedom agenda focused on the future.
That was Pence speaking to the Young America's Foundation. He said conservatism is bigger than any one election or any one person.
Now more than ever, conservatives need to be focused on the challenges Americans are facing today and offer a bold and positive agenda of solutions for the future.
Trump continues to dwell on the 2020 election and is still falsely claiming he won. Tamara Keith, NPR News.
The next round of COVID-19 vaccine boosters may be widely available sooner than we thought. NPR's Rob Stein reports the new versions are being designed to protect against the most contagious variants yet of the coronavirus.
The immunity that lots of people have gotten from getting vaccinated or infected has been wearing off, and the most contagious version of the virus to come along yet, the Omicron subvariant called BA.5, is making people even more vulnerable. So COVID is starting to become more serious than something like the cold or the flu again for more people, and most people younger than 50 aren't eligible for fourth shots, second boosters, to protect themselves. But here's the rub. Letting more people get boosted with the original vaccine now may kind of mess up plans to boost people with updated, hopefully more protective vaccines in the fall.
Rob Stein reporting. The Fed's Open Market Committee is holding a critical two-day meeting. More from NPR's David Gura.
Ahead of the Federal Reserve meeting, policymakers telegraphed they're likely to raise the Fed's benchmark interest rate by an additional 0.75 percentage point. By making the cost of credit more expensive, the central bank is trying to reduce demand to bring inflation under control. But it's not just demand. Persistent supply chain issues continue to push prices higher. In its latest earnings report, General Motors says deliveries were down because of part shortages. And some companies are cutting staff amid concerns the economy could worsen. The e-commerce company Shopify announced it's laying off 1/10 of its workers worldwide. David Gura, NPR News, New York.
Brittany Griner's drug trial continued today in Russia with an expert talking about medical marijuana. The American basketball star was arrested at a Moscow airport in February for illegally possessing vape canisters that contain cannabis oil. She argues the cartridges ended up in her luggage by mistake. Following written correspondence with President Biden recently, Griner pleaded guilty to the charges. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Henry Santoro. New testing of water in the spent fuel pool at the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station in Plymouth shows the water contains non-nuclear pollutants, and that means discharge of the water into Cape Cod Bay is prohibited by environmental permits. So says Seth Pickering of the Mass Department of Environmental Protection.
Mass DEP's position is that Holtec must comply with the requirements of the MPDES and surface water discharge permit, which plainly prohibit the discharge of pollutants in spent nuclear fuel pool water and other decommissioning-related wastewater.
David Noyes of Pilgrim owner Holtec says that water will be filtered to comply with those permits if Holtec does decide to release the water. Water from the nuclear plant also contains radiological contamination, but releasing radioactive elements is allowed by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission within federal limits. A popular beach in Westport was closed to swimming yesterday for a second time this month. It's not what you think. No shark sightings. Instead, swimmers were forced out of the water at Horseneck Beach for two reasons: a Portuguese man-of-war sighting and dangerous riptides. The story is in the Standard Times. Man-of-war tentacles are venomous, and contact with them can be extremely painful to humans. In rare occasions, contact with a man-of-war can be fatal. And, of course, riptides can quickly sweep swimmers from shore. State officials expect to reopen that beach today. It is 79 degrees in Boston right now. We're looking at a high about 85 before the day is over.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include DuckDuckGo, committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer internet privacy with one download. DuckDuckGo, privacy simplified at duckduckgo.com.
I'm Henry Santoro. This is GBH News.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. I am Marjorie Egan. Jim Browdy has the day off. Jared Bowen, Executive Arts Editor here at GBH, is filling in for Jim. Hello again, Jared.
Hello again, Marjorie.
We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are also streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. So new research out of Harvard's Kennedy Center, Shorenstein Center, has affirmed that the January 6th committee's findings so far are what we thought. Many of the people motivated to storm the Capitol on that day were directly influenced by former President Trump, fueled by fears of societal status loss, and stoked by the words of the former president. They rioted and attempted to delay or stop the certification of a free and fair election. Joan Donovan joins us now to discuss her team's research. She is the research director of the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Joan, thank you very much for coming back to talk to us.
Very excited.
Yeah, very excited by what you found. So, elaborate on what I just said. What did this report indicate about the motivations of the people on January 6th?
Yeah, so obviously, everybody's got a lot of feelings about what must have motivated those defendants or the people that stormed into the Capitol. So we wanted to do a gut check, essentially, to really suss it out. And so what we did was we looked at the charging documents for 417 of the defendants. We're now up over 800 defendants. So that's why we put it out as a working paper, because it's going to take us a while to get more of those court documents. They don't come out very quickly. But by and large, what we were learning as we were going through all of these different defendants, defenses, like their actual reasons for being there, we started to code, and which is the academic term for write it down. And what we found is about 1/5 of the people were motivated out of desire to support Trump. They thought the president is calling us here, we have to follow him. And about the same amount were motivated by this idea that the election had been stolen and that it was rigged, and that without their intervening as good citizens, democratically minded citizens, that the election was going to be stolen entirely on January 6th. And then way further down, we saw some of those motivations that sometimes animate protests, like people wanted to go and witness history, or some people had a general interest in violence. About the same amount of people thought it was going to be a peaceful protest. Absent from what we thought would be a big motivating factor was references to QAnon or other conspiracy theories about the Democrat Party. So that also was very interesting as we were digging through, because that seemed to be, at least in the media, a very big reason for why people were there. But when you start to actually look at the documents and look at people's rationales, it was only in about 17 of the documents.
So I understand for you and your team, as you began this digging in, the overriding concern here was the role of social media and what the role was and how it drove this. And so how did you frame this around that, and what ultimately did you find?
Yeah, so I've been researching the internet for over a decade, and my subspecialty or my expertise is really in social movements and how groups of people use the internet to coordinate. Broadly, we've studied Black Lives Matter, we've studied Standing Rock, we've studied the Occupy movement, and we've studied the alt-right. And so in this moment, what we really wanted to understand was, how is social media making new forms of political violence possible? And there's a lot of discourse out there right now about political violence and what it means. And so we wanted to understand from the point of view of the crowd, what kinds of messages were they paying attention to online? And in many of these documents, FBI agents have also included these people's social media postings that are relevant to January 6th, as well as links and other ephemera from the net that were important motivating factors. And what we're learning now is that essentially when a lot of people are talking to a lot of other people about events like this, it's not just talk, it's coordination, it's organization. When you look more in-depthly at how Facebook groups were utilized to get people to the Capitol, people were sharing cars. There was a lot of ride shares. There was a lot of sharing of resources, a lot of sharing of hotel rooms. And so we have to look at all of these things together to get a good sense of, well, what is the media ecosystem in which people are both looking at information and trying to suss out what is true and false? And then how does that mobilize them to jump from the wires to the weeds and to get into political action? And unfortunately, we know that this protest was going to be violent just by the rhetoric and the talk on social media in the lead up to January 6th, because at least online, many people there were very focused on Trump's now infamous tweet about "will be wild."
We're talking to Joan Donovan. She's research director of the Shorenstein Center on Media Politics and Public Policy at Harvard's Kennedy School. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding too is that many of these people were, as one story put it, primed beforehand to support the president, almost despite what happened in the election, because they were convinced beforehand that it was not going to be fair.
Yeah, so there's an interesting study that came out of other research that one of my colleagues, Rob Ferris, and another Harvard professor, Yochai Benkler, had done on the anatomy of a disinformation campaign. And they looked at all the data over the course of the summer of 2020 before the election about mail-in voting. And there was already this theory circulating that the mail-in voting is a problem, it's going to be a problem. And this theory of the red mirage, where it would look like Trump was winning, and then there would be a drop-off as they started to count these mail-in ballots, which happens every single election. But when you can put a frame around the facts, people then start to believe something insidious was going on.
So talking about, what's something that's not true in terms of voter election, reading through your report, you realize this is myth based upon myth, or myth wrapped around myth here. There's the myth of the election fraud, and then there's a myth, as you start to talk about in this report, the myth of the misrepresented peaceful protester, that there's only a peaceful protest that went awry here. How does that start to unfold and be propagated on social media?
That was an interesting one, because right at the beginning of during the insurrection, you had some people claiming that Antifa were the ones leading the charge. And what we really wanted to show with our reading of the court documents is that these people were ardent Trump supporters or ardent MAGA supporters, and that they had a history of being interested in electoral politics and interested in Trump. And so far what we found is nobody in any of the charging documents were associated with Black Lives Matter or Antifa or any of these other lefty organizations or anarchists even. And the other thing that we didn't want to do is we didn't want to oversample based on the militia groups that are getting a lot of attention for good reason in the media. We wanted to look at the full spectrum of people that were arrested at the Capitol that day. And so the idea that this was a tourist event, or that somehow had been undermined by another hyper-organized group that doesn't have the same kind of rationale for being there, just doesn't hold up now that we've looked at the evidence and are able to understand that in a very twisted way, disinformation mobilizes people to these horrible outcomes where people did feel a very deep and abiding love for democracy, or what they thought was democracy. And at the same time, they had a very charismatic leader that was willing to tell them anything in order to get them to the Capitol that day. And that was that's something that we're going to have to reckon with as we think about, well, what are the rules of the road going to be going forward for technology companies? And if they are used as a circumvention tool to get to the public and mobilize the public by our political leaders, we could end up very quickly spiraling into a very scary and fascist state.
Well, Joan, Donovan, that is one of the things that seems to me, and I don't have any of your expertise, but just to kind of a general looking at and talking to people, family members or whatever, that there is this reality-based world, and then this world of lies, I would call them, that get perpetrated through social media, through Facebook, through a lot of very powerful and commentators with millions in their audience, not just on television, on Fox News, but on the radio all across the country. So it is a dilemma when we live in these two different bubbles, and only one of them is on planet Earth, kind of. You know what I mean?
I mean, it is really scary to think about in the long run. What the Capitol riots should teach us is that it doesn't actually take an incredible amount of people to overtake the Capitol. One thing that's something that I really want to engage some social psychologists on to understand better, but seems to be the thing that held back these militia groups that had stations of sleeper cells armed around the city that were going to come in should President Trump have activated the insurrection act. That at the end of the day, they were all waiting because they wanted to follow orders. And that's what's so interesting about that final tweet where he says in the video, "Go home, go in peace." That ended things. People started to walk out. They started to file out of the Capitol. They were, of course, saying terrible things to the police on the way out, like, "We'll be back. Next time we'll bring guns." But there is something here about the notion that it wasn't just anyone that could call for a protest like this. It had to be someone in power, and it had to be someone that they felt could save them from any consequence for their actions.
So tell us about this element that you describe as performative masculinity that we saw that day. And you also point out that 95% of the group there was white, 85% was male.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. We had a research assistant, Francis Lee, that's over at the Divinity School, who was reading these documents and looking at these pictures and really wanted to understand, well, who is, the people that are these self-styled shamans and warriors and people who go in, with, especially the person that had gone in with the plastic handcuffs, as if they were like a vigilante, that they were going to arrest Nancy Pelosi or any of the other Congress people if they had gotten their hands on them. The gallows that were outside, this idea of the executioner being someone that's present here. And in a strange way, I think, not just Americans, but many of us get our understanding of how the world works and how men are supposed to behave from movies and culture, and this heightened performance of violence, and then just sort of extreme desire to show off, including people who are doing drugs inside the Capitol and smoking inside the Capitol and whatnot as a way to perform this kind of rule-breaking masculinity. And what we really wanted to understand about that wasn't just, these people are performing or they're acting out in these ways. They were also documenting it for social media, right? They were making content and they wanted to be remembered in this character. And so we're still unpacking that. We still want to understand how these kinds of masculinities might show up in other forums and in other ways that we might see political violence erupt. But it went beyond just the QAnon shaman, the man that was walking around covered in fur and with his helmet and whatnot on. There were a lot of people that were what we might call LARPing that day, live action role playing, and so, we want to understand that and that relationship between those behaviors and how they show up on social media and how people are trying to stylize themselves.
We're talking with Joan Donovan from the Kennedy School, Shorenstein Center. So, Joan, we have had a lot of reporting lately around here about the Patriot Front in Massachusetts. I did not realize that Massachusetts has a pretty significant number of mostly men, I guess, that belong to these groups. It surprised me. But in any case, we do. We had people here on July 2nd, we had an interruption of this library reading. What do you call the word for the library reading? They do the drag storytelling. Drag storytelling out of the library, etc. What is the role in social media in building that group?
Yeah, this is something that is not in this report, but we do research a lot on my team, racism and extremism and its manifestations from the wires to the weeds. So how do things that get organized online show up in Jamaica Plain, for instance, which is where there was a Saturday a drag queen story hour that was then picketed and protested by this group called NSC 131. So if you see these stickers around town, that is something that is, unfortunately, this is a neo-Nazi group, National Socialist Club. And there were several members of that group were arrested, and there was a protest out in front of the courthouse yesterday as well, suggesting that the police should take, a stronger stance against these disruptive groups. And there's some interesting ties here to the history of Massachusetts. For many years, there was a large punk scene in the city where there was a lot of scrappy fighting between skinheads and other anti-racist groups. And what we're seeing is that return of those groups to public life. These groups that they don't show up like skinheads anymore, but they do tend to wear very similar uniforms. The Patriot Front tend to look like Best Buy employees, khakis with blue shirts on. I know that's not a joke. It's what they dress as. And they'll wear these white masks. And so they were out, they had parked all the way out at Oak Grove when they did their demonstration and ended up back in Melrose afterwards. With NSC 131, these are very violent groups of people. These are people that will not hesitate to engage in violence. They are always recording what's happening as well. And so there's, if you do approach them, there's a chance they're going to turn you into content. And that group too does tend to show up in similar outfits, and they are largely disruptive. The hard part, I think, about what we're facing is that these are very small groups of people, but they're very tactical in the events that they show up at. And so we're going to eventually see probably more citizen defense of these events, and LGBTQ folks are starting to think about, as are Black churches, starting to think about, well, how do we keep awareness about these people? How do we know what they're doing so that we can be prepared to defend ourselves if need be? And ultimately, I think Michelle Mayor Wu, as well as others in BPD, are going to have to pay a lot more attention to this and be a lot more present around these issues if it's going to be contained.
Well, to that point, a lot of this, as we described at the outset, was about understanding the role of social media and the social media companies and fulminating these events. So, as you also said earlier, it doesn't take a lot of people to storm the Capitol, but it is tactical. And so does this mean we're just at the behest of the social media companies, the Facebooks, the Twitters of the world, who I think, as you've also pointed out, didn't immediately shut this down once they saw what was happening, and even in some cases deleted content after we knew what had happened? I mean, it seems like that they're in control of all of this at the end of the day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the technology platforms play a huge role in how these groups get organized, and especially how they stay in touch with each other between events. They don't have a robust infrastructure. You can't call up this group and, they don't have an office somewhere. What they do is they hang out in chat rooms or Facebook groups or in Twitter DM groups. We're seeing more and more of these groups get organized through Telegram, which is another chat app. And a lot of that organization and the in-between stuff is really what matters, in the sense that they're producing podcasts and YouTube videos, and they're getting organized, and they're spreading their message, and they're recruiting new people. And so there's a lot that these social media companies have to do in order to make sure that their products are not used in this way. And for the last several years, I've been working with many of the major companies, as well as some of the smaller ones like Twitch, to think through their policies related to hate, incitement, harassment, and extremism. And unfortunately, what's probably most interesting about these products is that they're not really built for moderation. they're built for amplification. They're built for coordination. They're not built in a way that really that easily would allow for removal of content or removal of personal information, for instance. Like if today someone decided they were going to dox me on Twitter and they wanted to put my name and address out there and my phone number, they could. And it would probably take me all day, if not a couple of days, to get it removed. And by then the damage is done. And so we have to get these platform companies to develop a social conscience, to think about their moral, ethical responsibility to the publics that they serve, and to back away from this feeling about maximalist free speech, because these platforms are highly interactive. It's not the case at like a website where you've got sort of one person that's running a website and it's up to other people to go there. On social media, your timelines are always moving. The content is always moving. There's relationships between different people that make the content more or less visible. And so without getting into the details of it, it's not that simple, but it's also something that these companies need to invest tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars into in the future.
Joan Donovan, thank you so much for your work. I really appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. We've been speaking with Joan Donovan, Research Director of the Shorenstein Center on Media, Politics, and Public Policy at the Harvard Kennedy School. Well, coming up, what is the likelihood of an indictment for former President Donald Trump? We'll hear from retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. That's next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Barriers at the beach. We began investigating, and it started a conversation.
And the coastal towns have these quasi-public beaches, but they are very, very restricted through parking.
Can we start with Suzanne in a car here?
I'm like, why don't they have like a nice little parking area that you could park your car safely, and then have a shuttle bus, and then because that beach is so. The beach is so big.
It's so funny.
We'd love to hear more from you. Visit gbhnews.org/beach.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Stoneleigh Burnham School in Greenfield, Massachusetts, now offering a 1-year voice and empowerment certificate program for 10th grade girls. More information at sbschool.org/voice-10. And the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority, providing resources and tools to help you navigate the college planning process, including customized plans of savings, loans, and guidance. More information at mefa.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library. We're streaming online at youtube.com, GBH News, and Jared Bowen is in for Jim Browdy. And we are joined now in person by Nancy Gertner. I remember her so well from when I was a cub reporter, and she was a cub lawyer. She is now a retired federal judge for the District of Massachusetts and a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. Thank you very much, Judge Gertner, for coming in here. So, Judge, because I am a avid watcher of Jim Browdy's television show, which is on every night at 7 o'clock, Greater Boston, and if I haven't watched it, I taped it. I've seen every episode of your appearing on there with him. And you were on with your colleague from Harvard Law School, Larry Tribe, a while back. The big question that a lot of Americans are asking is, will the Justice Department... Liz Cheney says she's not sure yet if she's going to refer a criminal referral to the Department of Justice, or criminal referral of Trump, I should say. But I think you have gotten there already based on what you said to Larry Tribe. So what do you think? Should the Justice Department indict Donald Trump?
Should or will. Let me take your should question first. I think that the January 6th committee has laid out a case which in any other universe would lead to an indictment. In any other universe. I mean, I was on the bench for 17 years. Before that, I was a lawyer for a long time. In any other universe, if you say, what did Trump know? He knew that his claims of election falsity and fraud were wrong. He knew that. How do we know that he knew it? His lawyers told him that so. Now, of course, he can say, I didn't believe them, but when the drug dealer says, I didn't believe that this was coke, it generally doesn't work. So clearly he knew that his claims of election fraud weren't true. He nevertheless, attempted to interfere in Georgia, attempted to set up false electors, even when they also told him that the false elector scheme was wrong. And then the final coup de grace, as far as I'm concerned, is his relationship to January 6th. I always thought that he was going to say, or others around him would say, well, he got carried away with rhetoric and you can't link what happened on the Capitol steps to what he said. Only you can link what happened at the Capitol to what he said, not just in the minds of the demonstrators, but in his mind. He knew that it would be violent, and then there was this telltale tweet that the January 6th committee put up about walking to the Capitol, which he read but did not send. So he knew there was a plan to go to the Capitol. He knew what his words would do. What does that mean in terms of criminal charge? I think they have intent. I think they have more than just words. I think they have actions. So do I think he should be indicted? I actually do. I'm also troubled by the reverse, sort of the counterfactual. If he is not, if he and Eastman and, and Clark and others who were involved in this are not charged, what does it say about our rules and our laws? And especially in a situation where we're not at all sure what what's going to happen with the Electoral Count Act and changes to our electoral system, you need to draw a line in the sand here and say that what he did was wrong.
Well, before we talk more about the Justice Department and what it may or why it may do whatever it does, a lot of people are talking about the free speech element here. But you don't see as much of a fine line at this point about what the president was saying that day. And it's interesting how much the committee has loaded us recently with what the president was saying and how the president was editing what he was going to say in terms of those speeches in the video. And we see his reaction and his own handwritten edits on his speech.
Criminal intent is oftentimes proven through speech, right? It's what you said you were about to do. It's what you said in a letter. So the fact that speech is the instrument doesn't make it, doesn't exonerate it. Here, and if it were only he got up there and, he sometimes engages in word soup and he got carried away, it would be one thing. And I'm sure that that's what a defense would look like. But there is enough evidence of, for want of a better word, premeditation here, intentionality, knew that there was going to be potential for violence, knew that there were people who were armed on the, on the ellipse that day, and knew that it was pre-planned that they were going to go to the Capitol. We'll find out more about what he knew, particularly as the other brilliance of the January 6th committee is that, there are now going to be they've legitimized a narrative against Trump. And what that's going to do is invite others to come forward, just as you saw with their hearings. So yeah, that will be a thing. He'll also say advice of counsel. I mean, I think on this program I've said this is really wonderful. You go and you look. You have a regular lawyer who says no, don't do this. You have another lawyer you consult who says don't do this. So then you go to the Common and you look for some drunk and you say, what do you think? Are you a lawyer? And you find someone. This is not a legitimate defensive, lawyer defense. So no, that it will be a difficult case, that it would be divisive, that it's an incredibly troubling thing to do in a democracy. All of that is true. But when the evidence piles up in the way that it has, I don't think they have a choice. I really don't.
We're talking to retired Federal Judge Nancy Gertner, but you do hear this over and over and over again, that same idea that it's too divisive, that it's going to be a very difficult case, that we need more evidence. I hear over and over again, intent. How do we know his intent, or how it is to prove his intent? And I'm not a lawyer, but you do.
But you play one on the radio.
I do. I play one on the radio, but it does seem to me that there's a lot to work with here. So why do people that are much smarter about this and longtime lawyers themselves, why are they so nervous?
Well, I think you said it at the beginning. This is what happens in banana republics. You get into office and then you immediately throw your opponent in prison. It's the reason why we were so appalled at the lock her up shout with respect to Hillary Clinton. That is exactly the wrong thing. That's why January 6th was so interesting. This is not a confidential grand jury investigation leading to charges and then a public trial. This is an amassing of evidence, to be sure hearsay, to be sure some of it may not be admissible, but an amassing of evidence about intent, about acts. For me, the other issue is that when the electors scheme failed, when he was told that he couldn't, that his various cases had failed, and then immediately he started tweeting, "Come to Washington." It was basically, he had alternative plans to stay in power, and he tried. And the other issue is how close he came. Yeah. If the certification had been delayed, then the plan was to go to state legislatures that were controlled by the Republicans to do whatever. And now we have a case before the Supreme Court in which the claim is being made that the state legislatures have the final say about who the electors will be. My God. So I've reached a point where I think that he ought to be indicted if the evidence is there, and it certainly sounds like it is, because the alternative, which is allowing this to go unpunished, would be far worse.
So how do you interpret what Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is thinking right now in terms of proceeding? There are a lot of people wondering why the committee is proceeding, why it's been able to amass all of this testimony, all of these witnesses are coming forward, they're getting witnesses before the Justice Department might get them in the same case. People see what's happening in Georgia, that prosecution moving forward for election fraud, and yet there's silence, which we often see from the Justice Department. They don't want to talk about what they're investigating. It's burned them in the past. So what do you think is happening?
I think I would have thought something different than this morning's papers when there was a report that 2 of Pence's aides were called before a federal grand jury. That's very interesting. That's the first indication we've had of what the Department of Justice is doing. What has Garland been doing up until now? He's been restoring the legitimacy of the Department of Justice so that when they move forward, they will be moving forward in a professional manner. And that makes perfect sense to me. If, however, they do not move forward, that will be a different issue. Then their desire to restore the legitimacy of the Department of Justice will have been, it seems to me, completely undone by their not prosecuting someone who did something wrong. The question then will be, what's the breadth of the prosecution, right? Will it be to obstruct the election? The scheme to put false electors in play can be its own charge, which is legitimate. The various calls to officials. Trump will clearly say, well, I believed it to be true. But as I said, every person I have ever had in front of me as a judge would say, oh, yes, I believed it to be true. I think I might have mentioned my favorite case when I was a lawyer. This is sort of related, is the guy who sold marijuana to an undercover agent, knowing he was an undercover agent, but thinking it was for his personal stash. Right? I mean, so he could say, gee, I thought it was right, I mean, I talked to, Joe Schmagegi, and he said it was fine. I'm sure it would be a very difficult case to prosecute. There's also an issue of timing. Garland has to move sufficiently in advance of the midterms in order to avoid the atmospherics of that. But he could, if whatever happens in the midterms, he certainly could move after that because he'll still be Attorney General.
Well, you know what I also heard your colleague, Lawrence Tribe from Harvard, bring up last night was the power of the purse issue, that were the Republicans to take over, they, of course, would have great control over the budget of Merrick Garland and the hiring and all that. So it is possible, is it not, that they could shut down or wound greatly the investigation into President Trump.
They could. There's no question about it. I mean, that's the difference between this and Watergate, right? Because there were reasonable Republicans who were appalled at what Nixon did. If the Republicans win, the current configuration of Republicans win in November, we will have a battle like we've never seen before. As I said, the answer to that can't be, do not pursue this. Yeah. Because, and that's why I think the January 6th committee was so extraordinary. I mean, I think they basically forced Garland's hand.
So in going back, you mentioned Mark Short, who is Vice President Pence's former chief of staff. What is the significance of him? He's the highest ranking official now to step forward before the committee and talk about what he knew that leading up to those days and that day. What's the significance of him being there?
Well, if the January 6th committee is the measure of this, then they're asking him about two things. One would be what was known about the potential for violence, that everyone knew there was a potential for violence, and particularly violence against Pence. So then Trump's actions, both in not sending in protection for the vice president, Trump's speech in focusing the crowd on Pence, and Trump's speech before then is very significant. So everybody knew that Pence was going to be a target. The other thing is the efforts, his efforts to get Pence to actually to do what was clearly not constitutional. That's an obstruction of the processes argument, of the legitimate processes of government argument. I mean, really, if it were, I keep on putting this in terms of sort of the ordinary drug case or the unimaginable. You call someone out and you say, this guy is getting in our way. I'm not asking you to kill him, but here's the gun. Yeah. I mean, it's in any other situation, this would have been circumstantial evidence of intent and of illegal acts.
Did you ever have anyone actually tell you this isn't? I didn't think it was cocaine.
Oh, sure.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
What did they think it was?
Well, who knows?
Confectioner's sugar
right,
or something?
Right. Oh, no. I mean, sadly, if you've lived long enough, you've heard it all, and I'm sure we'll hear more of it with Trump. And he will, and as I said, I remember when I watched I happened to be grading papers on January 6th, and I figured I would watch the certification process because it would be like paint drying. Oh my God, the notion that I thought that what Trump was going to say is my words got away with me. And I thought that would be the defense and that would be the end of it. And the First Amendment argument you're talking about then would be in play. If all it was at the last minute I got up there and I got sort of carried away with my rhetoric and this happened, it wouldn't be an issue. But what the January 6th committee has done is shown the intentionality before that moment.
What do you think of Liz Cheney?
She's remarkable.
She is remarkable.
She is really remarkable. She's really remarkable. There's no question about that. Yeah. And when the history of this is written, she will play a very prominent role. The other thing is that the committee has been brilliant. By making their case through Republican voices, and not just ordinary Republican voices, but people who were totally in favor of Trump, they defang the argument that this is, a Democratic, just a Democratic crusade. It's absolutely brilliant.
We're talking to retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. I wanted to ask you briefly about the Georgia case. That's where they're looking into this fake electors scheme and possibly talking about racketeering charges. It's an Atlanta district attorney down there, an African-American woman, which would have a certain irony if she ends up being the one that is most effective in forcing the former president into accountability. But do you think that is an easier case or not?
Well, I think it's a subpart of the larger case.
Yeah.
It's certainly, what was the illegal act? Let's sort of do criminal law 101. What's the illegal act? The illegal act was fake electors. The illegal act was was the classic Raffensperger call, come up with 11,000 ballots. So those are illegal acts. And then did he intend that? Well, he clearly knew about the fake elector scheme. I don't know exactly what his fingerprints are with respect to Georgia, but he knew about it in general. And again, that may be an interesting link. The Raffensperger call is extraordinary. I mean, again, let me put this in drug dealer terms, right? I mean, it would be, would you put the drugs over, on Boylston Street, where no one can find it, and the guy does it or doesn't do it, and somehow you say, well, I had nothing to do with it. Doesn't make any sense. So I don't know. I mean, I know Trump knew of the fake elector scheme in general. I'm not sure what the evidence is that what he knew about that fake elector scheme, the Georgia one, but we certainly have the Raffensperger call, which is unbelievable. Just unbelievable.
And how does this all, again, work in adjacent to what's going to come out of the Justice Department? Do they get absorbed at some point?
Well, the having a parallel congressional proceeding and a criminal case is, in fact, difficult. We saw that with the investigations of Ali North with the Iran-Contra, where you're giving the Iran-Contra proceedings, where giving North immunity before Congress then had an impact on his criminal trial. Arguably, the immunity extended to the criminal case. I don't think this committee has given anyone immunity. If someone claims the fifth, that's usually the end of it. There is a concern about the press surrounding this and pretrial publicity. That's a little bit difficult for Trump to say, because while there may be a lot of pretrial publicity if he winds up being indicted, he's also a public figure with massive support himself. So he's not like you getting in trouble where the only thing that people knew about you was the trouble. In this situation, people who are his supporters are continuing to support him, but it certainly complicates things. It also means there may be multiple versions of somebody's speech. There's no question, somebody's testimony. When the Department of Justice interviews someone, when a prosecutor interviews someone, they take pains to make sure that they are hearing only one version, whereas the committee is just letting everyone let everything hang out. So Cassidy Hutchinson, the extraordinary 26-year-old, may have had one version of what she said. Then there is another, not an inconsistent version with additional details. That would be fodder for cross-examination. So the January 6th committee could be raising complexities for a subsequent prosecution. But on the other hand, I'm not sure that if they didn't do what they're doing, Garland would feel any pressure whatsoever. So.
Nancy Gertner, you were a judge for a long time. You were a lawyer before that. Donald Trump is a very charismatic man. He's been a liar most of his life. He's a very, very skilled liar. Obviously, millions of people believe the lies he told. He's telling still. I wonder, in either as a lawyer or when you were a judge, if you had anybody that was a defendant that was charismatic like that was a really good liar, that managed to sway jurors, or was just the lawyering too good and they were uncovered in their lies. But he's certainly extraordinary in that regard. I can't say I've ever encountered anyone like that who could. But then again, I don't know what he has been like in court. That would have been very interesting. He has settled most of the cases before, but if he got on the stand and he said, well, I never told Raffensperger about the 11,000 votes, and you have a tape. There are limits to what he can lie about in this situation. But who knows? He is very charismatic, and obviously some people are persuaded.
I remember how many people thought he would fall on his face during the debates, especially against Hillary Clinton, and that did not happen.
Right. But in a court of law, he will not be able to hover around the defense lawyer in the same way. I go over that in my mind a lot about what I would do if I were her.
What would you do?
Well, I still haven't figured out what to do, because if you get angry, you know that's wrong.
Right.
That was the classic feminist, pitfall.
That's
if you
right.
ever got angry, somebody would say, oh my God, you're just so serious. On the other hand, maybe what she should have done, which is sort of not in her background, is that she should have started walking around him and saying, shall we dance? The only way to deal with him is through humor, but that would have been hard to do.
Yeah, if people don't recall, he was actually standing over her and very close to her.
Right.
It was very intimidating,
right,
I thought.
Right. No, humor is the only way. Making fun of him is actually the only way that you can deal with this. Shall we dance?
Yeah. So, Nancy Gertner, we're almost out of time here, but I just wonder, you talked about the DOJ and Merrick Garland's efforts to restore its credibility. It must pain you somewhat to see the declining respect for the United States Supreme Court.
It's really very, very troubling, and I'm not sure what to do about it. I'm part of groups that are that spend their time talking about judicial independence and about the legitimacy of the courts, and that's the space that I've lived my life in. On the other hand, and some will say that criticizing the court in the way that I think they deserve to be criticized, delegitimizes it and undermines its standing. I think I come back to what I said about Trump a moment ago, which is that not criticizing them and pretending that it is normal to reverse major precedents in a short 2 years, to say that that's normal to throw out all of this, I think is wrong. So I think we risk delegitimizing the court in order to tell the truth.
Well, it's a thrill to talk to you as always, Nancy Gertner. I'm so glad you're with us here at Boston Public Radio. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nancy Gertner is a retired federal judge for the District of Massachusetts, a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School, and a BPR contributor. Coming up, we'll hear from our food man, Corby Kummer, on the end of the line for the beloved ice cream truck staple, the Choco Taco. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH.
Saraya Wintersmith in for Arun Roth, coming up on GBH's All Things Considered. The state legislature is set to pass a bill expanding abortion access. The biggest question? Whether Governor Baker will sign it. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu is signing an executive order aimed at easing the child care crunch. And newly minted Hall of Famer David Ortiz will be back at Fenway tonight to be honored by the Red Sox. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Be revolutionary. UMass is the Commonwealth's flagship public research university and committed to the relentless pursuit of progress. Learn more at umass.edu. And Morningside Music Bridge, returning to Boston. The summer program shines a spotlight on young classical musicians from around the world, with concerts now through July 30th at New England Conservatory. mmb.international.
Trusted. Local news. This is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. We are joined now by our food man, Corby Kummer, Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy. Thank you very much, Corby, for joining us as always.
Thank you.
I should say we are at the Boston Public Library, just in case I haven't said it enough, and we are streaming on youtube.com, GBH News. So, Corby, this is something I'm really excited about, being able to go up and down the grocery aisles and figure out the terrible things that might be in the food I'm about to pull off the shelf with artificial intelligence. What is going on here?
So there's a number of apps already that help you navigate which are the healthier choices when you are in the supermarket at the aisle. One, for example, is called How Good. And the idea of How Good is it has 40 different kinds of reasons that you might want or not. Do they treat their workers well? Are they good to the environment? Are they sustainably grown? And is it healthful? Now, led by Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Dean Darius Mozafarian, a group of data scientists are going to help you understand which are the most and least processed foods, whatever the label says, because there's so much greenwashing on labels to make it sound really healthy, but it might not be so healthy.
So when they say 100% fruit juice, what does that really mean?
Well, it could mean that they froze all the fruit juice, they separated from the pulp long ago, and then they reconstituted it in another packing plant, added back the pulp in the proportion in which it would appear in the natural fruit, put in a bunch of stabilizers, and shipped it out in a refrigerator to your supermarket.
Okay. Thank you.
And too much of that is not a good thing, I take it.
Yeah.
So yesterday, Corby, we were talking about happy hour, which does not exist in Massachusetts and hasn't since the 1980s, but there is a movement on Beacon Hill to possibly bring it back. And I think I can say for both Marjorie and I, we were surprised that so many people are not necessarily in favor of it, including the restaurant industry. How do you think this is going to play out? And we should mention that we're one of 8 states in the country that still ban happy hour.
So happy hour got blamed on a terrible death after a drinking game. And when Mike Dukakis was governor, he successfully led a fight to eliminate legal happy hours from all of Massachusetts, saying, they encouraged binge drinking, discounts, jugs of wine and beer offered in drinking games. There's been a lot of pushback on whether that actually is more correlated with accidents or dangerous driving than other kinds of drinking. But the main reason you and Marjorie should have been so surprised is just think about it for business people. Restaurants, as one restaurant owner is about to open in Jamaica Plain, I'm glad to see, said, my ingredient prices don't go down between 4 and 5 p.m. It costs me just the same to make these drinks. And one of the Frateroli family of the North End, a family that owns many restaurants, said, this is going to be a race to the bottom. Why should I lower my prices? When you think of it, everybody is losing their profit margin if they discount drinks. There's just no incentive for them to do it. I think that Julian Sear, who introduced this into the Massachusetts State Senate, knows the perils of restaurants and what they faced during the pandemic. And the idea is, let's give them every tool they have to bring customers back to gather in person. And if that's happy hour because it's something they're used to and they love, let's give them a chance to win back their business. But the many restaurant owners that the Globe for this article interviewed said, we're not interested.
Which is, I guess, surprised me because I always thought that this was a mechanism to bring people in on a Monday night or a Tuesday night when they might not ordinarily go to a restaurant, or come in earlier when the restaurant's a little quieter.
That absolutely might be, and it does get more people through the door, but it doesn't necessarily help the bottom line of that many bars and restaurants. And the liquor industry didn't like it either, because what it would encourage is that wholesale and bulk purchases of liquor would be more for cheap off-label brands, which have lower margins than it would be for the high premium brands, which command higher profit margins.
So, Corby Kummer, I hadn't realized until some of our staff members were almost brought to tears by the news that the Choco Taco was gone for good. But apparently, the Choco Taco is no longer with us, and it is an American tragedy, as I understand it.
That's what we were told by our staff.
And what is it, please?
I think that we have to ask Zoe, who is heartbroken.
She's not the only one.
She is heartbroken. So Klondike, maker of beloved Eskimo bars,
yes,
and pies, which we love, and the silver label, it's wonderful, it's nostalgic, it's an iconic brand that has been around since at least the 1930s. They had a very clever idea, which is to package in a taco shape vanilla ice cream with chocolate-covered so-called taco shell, and then nuts that go all around the semicircle of
For that
the
reason
tacos.
alone, it needs to go away.
You don't like nuts in a semicircle and chocolate?
No.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, Jared.
No nuts and ice cream.
Oh, okay.
The idea is that you can mix the chocolate and nuts more in and the wafer more in every bite because it's better distributed when you just think of the shape. So what I have to tell Zoe is go out and buy a drumstick because it's the same ingredients in a different shape, and you'll still be a happy ice cream fan.
Oh, wait a minute.
We have an
Zoe
update.
apparently just went to 7-Eleven to look for Choco Tacos, but they've already replaced the Choco Taco with, what does it look like?
A Klondike shake.
A Klondike shake.
Whatever that is.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
You can boycott Klondike and go for rival products that have the same ingredients in them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well,
you know what I learned yesterday? We were talking about different, from you, I think. Was it the waffle cone comes from Syria? It was invented in Syria. I did not know that. Did you know that?
I did not.
The waffle cone.
Well,
do we know who invented the Choco Taco?
Somebody in marketing at Klondike in the 70s, I think.
Well,
the early 80s.
R.I.P. Choco Taco. That's all we have to say about that.
Okay.
So let's move to Lynn now. Lynn, City of Sin, a slogan that's being leveraged by a food store there.
What I love is that the owner, Michelle Harrington, says, we embrace the name. It's a sassy community. Of course, Lynn, City of Sin. But what she's doing is she's been there for 7 years, is that she had a French Vietnamese restaurant, and she thought, how can I sell more of my products and also serve the neighborhood? And the best part of this story about her winkingly named Sin City Superette is she reached out to the community and she said to them, what do you want us to put on our shelves? So she's got lots of prepared foods, including the Sin City cheeseburger on a potato roll, her biggest seller, fresh seafood, well-priced caviars, which are made in America and Israel, upscale crackers, but also Ritz and saltines, also a single battery, an Advil, one small pack of Kleenex. I love the generic name. She says, Lucy's. They're loose and they're individual, and you go into a convenience store needing them. The idea is that this is a small store that asks its members in its community, what do you need to come in here and buy? That's what I love.
Yeah, and tell us about the place next door, though. This was her other restaurant is quite a sensation as well, right?
Yeah, it's a French Vietnamese restaurant that's been very successful. Nightshade Noodle Bar, and
yes.
So we all want to go there. But think of Pegu in Central Square, which opened a supermarket and has done so much to help restaurants stay alive during the pandemic. You branch out to what your community needs and wants and is in the market for and is up to your capacity. And this kind of invention and reinvention and self-creation based on community needs, I really celebrate. And I'm so glad it's in Lynn, and I hope she inspires lots of local supermarkets.
We're talking to Corby Kummer, our food man. I had never heard of this woman, but I heard her spoken about repeatedly on National Public Radio yesterday, and we have a story about her today. Diana Kennedy, 99 years old, just passed away at her home in Mexico, but she became, she's an English woman, white woman, but she became an expert on Mexican cooking. Tell us about her.
So she's a woman who grew up in England, a sort of interesting rough and tumble career in the 40s. She was born in 1923. She died at 99. And when she was in New York on a foreign posting, she fell in love with a New York Times correspondent based in Mexico City named Paul Kennedy. And she fell in love with a variety of different kinds of cuisine, understood that certainly no place in the England of her birthplace or America where she'd lived was there anything like what she came to know as authentic, unbelievably varied, sophisticated regional cuisine of Mexico, firmly rooted in history, so much a product of the different cultures that came and invaded, the native tribes that grew and discovered many plants. It is she who opened the doors of the world to the richness of Mexican cuisine and made it be as respected as China's unbelievably varied and sophisticated cuisine, similarly based on cuisines of poverty. This is what people could grow, this is what they could find, and here is the unbelievably inventive use they made of it. So she became like an anthropologist. She would go from village to village. She would bring her notebook, later her camera, and she would record what people did. When in the foreign correspondence circle she was traveling in the late 60s, she would say, wow, this is good. Could you, a nice Mexico City woman she met, could you tell me about cuisine? They would laugh and say, oh, we don't know how to cook. Come and talk to our cooks. And the cooks would say, you have to come to my village. So she did it. And she made her whole life sleeping in a truck she would drive around into rural places, spending time with women in their kitchens and their stoves to understand what is this cuisine. She opened everyone's eyes to it. So The Essential Cuisines of Mexico is an absolutely necessary book. And she inspired Rick Bayless of Frontera Grill, Topolobampo, and a million different cooking shows to write his wonderfully useful books. She's the forerunner, and she was incredibly flinty and brave and no nonsense and terrifying to be with as a person.
Really?
And, oh, yeah. And you get all of that in a 2020 documentary called Nothing Fancy that was written about her. She felt nobody else was doing the kind of serious research or making the financial sacrifices. She said, this is why I'm not rich, because I spend all of my time and what money I have going around to find these women and record their traditions before they vanish.
What I thought was so interesting in reading about her, well, one, that she was not the one who brought the Choco Taco to the United States, but also...
she would have to say about the Choco Taco.
But in that vein, that there was this conception around the world, and certainly in the United States, about what Mexican food was, which was, in our case, Americanized versions, interpretations of Mexican food, and she upended all of that by introducing us to these wonderful ingredients and meals and plates.
You know, there was a bastardization, if I may, of Mexican cuisine that might have been worse than any, Chinese food in America. There are wonderful histories of Chinese food in America, and they were also Americanized. But because of the incredibly long border we share with Mexico and the rich cultural interchange that goes back centuries in this country, there had been a complete adaptation, and she would say complete misunderstanding of the food that was still made in Mexico. So she had a tremendous amount of work, but also a base of familiarity in America. Even with completely inauthentic versions, it led people to be more open to what she understood as what was genuine Mexican cuisine.
You know, in the piece I heard yesterday talking about Diana Kennedy, who, as we've pointed out, died at 99 years old, there was some question about cultural appropriation. You know, would she be able to be doing this now? Would she be criticized for being an English woman who's many people feel is one of the great experts on Mexican cooking? What do you think?
That she never talked down. She completely respected the people and the women she celebrated, and she never appropriated it as if it were her own.
Yep.
And she never took shortcuts to concede to American cooks. One of the great quotes, which the New York Times used in its subhead, was, there's always someone who wants to learn how to clean an iguana.
Okay.
She really meant it. So she was, cold turkey. You had to do it right, or you got out of her kitchen and her cooking class.
So, Corby, the world's 50 best restaurants list is out. We all love our lists, even though this seems a fairly unattainable, inaccessible list for a lot of us to show up at these restaurants or go to them. This is not the Michelin Guide. This is adjacent to that. But there's this takedown of this list and what this really represents when you try to assemble a list of the world's greatest restaurants.
I underline and applaud every word in this article in Grub Street by Alan Sitma about what, the idea that this is a completely hokey advertiser-driven list, the 50 best restaurants that is only chummy and clubby, the few people who are self-described restaurant critics who vote. And it's where they get junkets. It's where they can afford to go. It's rich people judges. It has nothing to do with quality and what makes food really enjoyable. But with a certain level of ambition and pretension, one of the good things about it is it has not been at all confined to Europe or the United States. It was the first to make a huge deal of Noma and that cuisine. It's also been very big.
What's Noma?
Oh my goodness, Marjorie.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I know I read the story that says it's in Copenhagen, I believe, but it's been named.
It catapulted to world fame as a kind of, we were just talking about Diana Kennedy going all around in a truck. Rene Redzepi, the chef founder of Noma in Copenhagen, would go foraging for pine needles and live ants. Yes, Marjorie, live ants that they would harvest. He would harvest from very northern Scandinavian and Danish forests and lakes and going farther north. And so he also took the idea of let's explore every possible edible natural product, tree bark, tree resin, all these roots. And then he would come back and present it absolutely gorgeously and stunningly.
Ants?
Can I just describe Marjorie's face right now, which is a look of total horror?
Ants as a last-minute garnish on a beautiful creme fraiche.
Wait a minute. Did you say live ants?
I do. They would harvest live ants. I went on one of these.
And put them on your creme fraiche?
Yeah.
Alive?
Absolutely. Yep, alive.
So
and
again,
you pop them into your mouth, and they taste a little lemony. They taste
God,
a little citrusy. I have put many live ants in my mouth.
Really?
Thanks to many trends he started. But anyway, back to this.
We have to talk to Zoe, and she needs to call Klondike. If Klondike put them on the Choco Taco, that never would have left the 7-Eleven, for sure.
I thought they'd be fried ants, like you used to buy the chocolate-covered ants when you were a kid to dare to eat them. But live ants, that is, you ate live ants, Corby?
Lemony live ants.
I have a new...
I have, but wasn't there a restaurant in Cambridge that for a while was putting fresh crickets, as in live crickets, in some of its dishes? This was when Noma was starting these worldwide trends.
Oh, my God.
I say it was Bond and Bondier. I'm going to get an immediate tweet saying, no, it wasn't me, but maybe it was. So in any case, there were some of these. The idea is this is a much more affordable source of nutrition that is much more environmentally sustainable. Mexico, which we've been talking about, many cuisines have made insects a staple. So it's about time we got with a program. I don't think we're ever going to get with that program. You certainly aren't, Marjorie.
I guess I'm not. But what I want to know, though, is what you're basically saying is that the people that vote on this best restaurant list are being influenced by the fact that they get free meals at these restaurants? Is that what you're talking about? It
sounds like exactly what took down the Golden Globes, by the way.
Yeah.
You're so right, Jared.
Well, elaborate on that. What do you mean? When you say the junkets, what do you mean?
Well, Jared was saying that the Golden Globes was a tiny self-declared and self-defined list of so-called impartial judges, whereas they might write for a website in a small country in Europe, and suddenly they're saying we're worldwide judges of the best movies. And it was completely white, as the 50 best restaurants has been overwhelmingly male run, and it's the fine cuisine style of abusive kitchens that are now coming under a lot of scrutiny. The whole idea of fine dining and cuisine that upholds these ridiculous standards that kind of bogus lists like this celebrate is a toxic work environment. The guy from Noma himself wrote a mea culpa about, I've thrown tantrums, I've been a bad toxic male to work with, and we all have to change our ways. And so there's a whole reevaluation going on, but not in the clubby world of the 50 best restaurants.
Okay, Corby Kummer, our food man. Jim isn't here today, which is a great tragedy, because one of his great things to talk about is how much he loves, deli sandwiches and these, corned beef sandwiches that are like 1.5 feet high. But apparently, there's some trouble in Jewish deli world. Carnegie Deli is no longer there. The Stage Deli no longer there. What's going on?
Well, there's long been trouble in the Jewish deli world, and there have been great books about Jewish delis, one by David Sachs, even in the past 10 years. The trouble is that the Jews whose grandparents and great-grandparents loved Jewish deli, they love Italian, they love Chinese, they love Mexican, they love any Vietnamese, any other kinds of cuisines, and they don't feel particularly tied to the cultural traditions of the Jewish deli, because they might not well have grown up in houses that had knishes, that had pickles, that had sort of exotic foods, that had constant pastrami and corned beef sandwiches. They're not gone by any means, and there's many, many people who celebrate them. But the number of delis in New York, according to this New York Times article about a Los Angeles exhibition on the Jewish deli, which is called, of course, I'll Have What She's Having. The inevitable and brilliant name of the exhibition is that there were 3,000 to 5,000 Jewish delis in New York in the early 1900s, and now there are maybe a couple of dozen. It's a tradition that just dissipated as Jews moved out of low-income housing, cramped housing in the Lower East Side. But the nostalgia and the pull is something different now. So Mamala's, for example, in Cambridge.
I just was there yesterday. They had great pastrami sandwiches.
Yeah, well, there you are, because you might have grown up having pastrami sandwiches as part of a generation that looked to its grandparents. I think those generations are different. Now you go to Mamala's hoping and isn't there the Great Boston Pastrami Company, in which you're going to be educated in these salted cured meats, these pickles, garlic in everything, these very heavy leaden foods that also, are very nostalgic for those who have Eastern European Jewish rootstock. But I love the idea of the museum exhibition. And it's also what I love the idea of. There's a simmering debate, a raging debate that Jim was going to have to weigh in on and be angry about. Many deli aficionados think the best deli that survives in the U.S. is in Los Angeles.
Oh.
And Canter's, Canters, and Langer's, I think, might have the best pastrami in the U.S. The heck with anything that's left in New York. And it often does win tastes-off in very discriminating fine schmeckers, meaning gourmets.
Okay, we have to point out that the reason I'll have what she's having, the Jewish deli, is named I'll have what she's having is because of the great scene from when Harry met Sally, when Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan are having lunch at a famous deli.
Katz's Deli, right? In
Katz's
New York?
Deli in New York. And,
still there.
And Meg Ryan gives a demonstration of something I probably shouldn't get into on the radio.
No, it's
but
time to go.
Corby Kummer, thank you. I wasn't sure how to say that tactfully. Corby Kummer, thank you very much as always for being with us. Talk soon.
Just in time, Corby Kummer is Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a Senior Editor at The Atlantic, and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Well, up next, CNN's John King joins us for the latest national political headlines. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
GBH thanks our sustaining members, listeners in our community who make easy, recurring contributions of just $10 or $15 a month to support this station. The impact of these gifts can be heard every day on GBH, with in-depth local stories and engaging conversations about what's happening here in Boston and beyond. To learn more about how you can become a sustaining member, visit gbh.org/sustainer.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Showcase Cinemas, the new feature film Where the Crawdads Sing, based on the novel by Delia Owens, is now playing at Showcase Cinemas. Tickets available on the Showcase app or at showcasecinemas.com. And New England Dental Group, committed to helping you stop hiding your smile by offering a variety of dental implant solutions to replace missing teeth in one of their 7 locations. Learn more at newenglanddentalgroup.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jared Bowen is in for Jim Browdy. We are live at the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com, GBH News. And we are joined now by John King from CNN. He is CNN's chief national correspondent and the host of Inside Politics, which you watch every day at noon and steal questions from, so we have good questions to ask John King when he gets here. And one of the things you were talking about today, John, I should say hello. Hello, John.
Hello there. Happy
Hi.
Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday to you, too. But I'm so excited to talk about this because we were talking about this with Nancy Gertner. The entire country, I think, is wondering what is going to happen with the January 6th committee and the Department of Justice, Merrick Garland. But on your show today, you were talking about how 2 aides to the former vice president have already been before the grand jury at the department that's involved with the Department of Justice. So what can you tell us?
2 very important people, Mark Short, who was Mike Pence's chief of staff in the days that matter, and Greg Jacob, who was his chief legal counsel. And if you followed the January 6th hearings, you've seen testimony from both Mark Short and Greg Jacob. Look, they had eyes on, from election day through insurrection day, up to inauguration day, on what Trump was trying to do, which was subvert the election and steal the election. And they specifically had very good eyes, both in terms of being in some of the meetings themselves and then having many conversations with their boss, the vice president of the United States, about Donald Trump's effort, along with Rudy Giuliani and John Eastman and others, to essentially create these fake electors out in the key battleground states like Arizona, like Georgia, and elsewhere, and then tell Mike Pence he had the power to say, well, there's a dispute here. Georgia sent Biden electors and Trump electors. Arizona sent Biden electors and Trump electors. Therefore, I'm not going to certify the election. And Mike Pence, in the end, realized on the advice of his legal counsel and his own judgment that was poppycock, I'm going to use a polite term, and unconstitutional. And of course, Joe Biden is the president. But is that illegal? There's no question. John Eastman, one of the Trump attorneys, was told in one of the meetings, I believe it was on January 4th, that this is illegal, that you cannot do this. And they continue to press it anyway. So what does it tell you? It tells you that they're interviewing very high-profile witnesses who were eyewitnesses to a lot of the meetings going on inside the Trump West Wing in the key days. Does that mean they're investigating Donald Trump? Does that mean they're investigating John Eastman? We can't answer those questions, but it certainly means it tells you how serious this grand jury is. After weeks, if not months, of a lot of Democrats saying, hey, is the Justice Department dragging its feet? I think this is, more than anything, Jared and Marjorie, a reminder that some things happen behind the curtain, and there may be a lot more happening behind the curtain that we just don't see.
So what is the strategy? Why are we seeing this? Why are we aware and made to be aware of this one?
In this case, some Wall Street Journal reporters, I think just, either we're in the right place at the right time. I don't want to say lucky because it's good shoe leather reporting. Saw them coming out of the grand jury room. There's a federal grand jury meeting at one of the courthouses here in Washington, D.C. And we also know from some great Washington Post reporting today as well, it's very related to this. They had to use a public records request to get released the copies of subpoenas to some of the Arizona people involved in the fake elector scheme there. And we know the federal grand jury is looking at that. We also know that separate Georgia investigation, which is a state or a county investigation, is looking at the same idea. And I think what it gets at is that a lot of this, you've heard, you guys talk to smart lawyers all the time, and they're smarter than I am, but they say it's hard to prove certain things because of your right to free speech. You can say Donald Trump won in a landslide if you want to say that, even though the math and the facts are against you, because this is America and you have free speech. Here, you have people signing documents. People transmitting documents. The goal of those documents was to defraud the United States government, was to steal, was to cheat in the election. So if you have signed documents moving back and forth, it's any prosecutor would tell you that that's the golden evidence in court. That you can't just claim free speech. You have it. You're signing papers. You're actually actively trying to defraud the government of the United States through stealing and through creating this fraud, the fake electors. So that's what makes this so significant. Is it's clear the Justice Department has a very, very serious investigation going, even though we don't get to, we should not. We're not supposed to. As a journalist, you want to see everything, but we're not supposed to know a lot about these. A, because that should be the case for any investigation, but B, just think about how highly sensitive this one is.
Let's switch gears for a second. I was talking with Jared about this before the show, how surprised I was, and good for people who are in gay marriages and want to be in gay marriages, that 47 House Republicans, it's not many, but it's certainly more than some people anticipated, a vote to write same-sex marriage into law. This is going through the House right now because of the Supreme Court, the fears about the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas talking about going after gay marriage, going after contraception. But I was stunned that only 8 Republicans, in the same effort to kind of codify, however you say that word, things that the Supreme Court may be undoing as they have undone abortion, that only 8 Republicans joined Democrats in voting for the right to purchase contraception without government restrictions. I mean, Nancy Pelosi said something like, do these people not know what's going on in their own families? I mean, the families of 12 that you probably saw as a kid in Catholic Church, I certainly saw them, they're not around anymore, so something has changed, and most of us would say it's contraception. I don't get how that is a winning position, even if you do link contraception to abortion, for Republicans. Contraception is controversial in 2022?
I think this is going to be one of the many layers. Let's stay on the contraception, but also the Supreme Court decision, the Dobbs decision. Now we keep saying Roe. Roe is gone. Dobbs is now the law of the land. Look, this is going to be, and the different pieces of this are going to be big issues in the November election. Democrats believe, and we will see if they're right, that they will be hugely motivating issues, and that they will maybe keep in the Democratic camp a lot of the suburban Republicans or suburban independents who were Republican leaving, who revolted against Donald Trump. Democrats believe, especially among suburban women, that inflation, other frustrations with Joe Biden, or just plain old frustrations, and Joe Biden happens to be in charge, which happens in politics a lot, was going to hurt them this year. The Democrats believe this is a stepping stone to get back. We'll see. We'll see how the elections play out. As to the Republican argument on the contraception issue and on the same-sex marriage issue, one of the things Republicans say is that this is a states issue, that each state should decide the law within their states. Another thing Republicans say is that this is an election year messaging stunt by the Democrats, that they're only doing this because they know they're in deep straits right now, dire straits right now in terms of the political climate, and they're trying to find ways to reverse the political climate. The voters can decide whether that's right or wrong. Back to where you started on same-sex marriage, Senator Susan Collins today said she is confident now that they will have at least the 10 Republicans necessary for the Senate to follow the House. And to essentially codify the right to same-sex marriage. We'll see if that plays out. We'll see if the Democrats can get that done before the August recess or if it waits till later in the year. But that momentum does seem to be building in a convincing way.
I was just about to ask you that because that had not been the case, this morning when we were prepping for the show. But what is changing? Why is suddenly same-sex marriage more palatable at the Capitol when we've known, just like abortion rights, it's been more palatable to the general population?
It's a great question, Jared. I think a part of it is the personal experience, that everybody now has a personal experience where either it's somebody in your family or it's a neighbor or it's a close friend, or in the case of many of these members of Congress, they say somebody on their staff in the Congress. And so everybody would have a different one. I will say one thing that's interesting to me is that one of the keys for the Republicans here is Ron Johnson, the conservative Tea Party Republican Trump ally from Wisconsin, is up for re-election this year. We expect that race to be quite competitive. And I think he was a surprise coming out to say that he said, I think this is an election year stunt by the Democrats, but I will vote for it. And one of the reasons he said he would vote for it is the Supreme Court decision am I saying this right? Obergefell? The gentleman is a constituent. He's from Wisconsin. And so Johnson said, look, the court made this the law of the land. I still view it as the law of the land. I think what the Democrats are doing is political, but since that's my position, I see no reason to vote against it. So he's going to both criticize the Democrats, but then vote for the legislation. So that gets you a conservative when you're trying to get from 5 to 10. So that's a green light to a couple of others who might say, do I want to make this a political vote or do I want to make this a decency vote? And they're coming around to the decency argument that this is the right thing to do. Let's do it.
Well, didn't we have a Republican who voted against gay marriage, and his son is either getting married to a gay man? Did get married last weekend or something?
Republican Glenn Thompson, who voted against the legislation and then 3 days later attended his gay son's wedding and said how proud he is to have a new son-in-law in the family. So call that irony, call that hypocrisy. What Congressman Thompson said is that he used the Democratic stunt line. He said that the Democrats are only doing this as an election year stunt, and so he voted no. Again, I think that's it is a fair question to say, if this is what you want for your son and your family, why can't all Americans have it? Why can't you set do what Senator Johnson said if you want to. If you think it's in your interest as a Republican to say, I think the Democrats are only doing this for a stunt. However, I also think it's the right thing to do. Why not do that? But Congressman Thompson will have to answer that. He's from a very safe district, though. I think he's okay.
John King, you're down there all the time, hobnobbing with all these people in Congress. Do you know any Republicans that have 12 children?
I do not at the moment. You're stumped. See, I love one of my favorite things about this every year. I always call it this is my Tuesday therapy. I get to talk to people who have the right accent and root for the right teams, even when they're playing miserably.
Oh yeah.
But it's also a little bit of stuff to dummy. I do not.
Neither do I.
I was very briefly up there. I was in Western Massachusetts and Maine with my youngest son, but we drove through Dorchester. So he's been there before, but he's 11 now. So I showed him 16 and 18 King Street. The house is a triple decker, and then the house next door where I grew up. And I was explaining to him the McGraths and the Careys and the Tranfords and the O'Briens and the Doyles. Some of those families had 8, 10, and
yes.
The Careys, I think, had 12. Those were the good old days, right?
John King grew up on King Street?
He did.
I did not know that.
The joke in my family was that my dad went door to door until he found somebody who lived there who would marry him.
We're talking to John King from CNN. I also learned on CNN this morning that more and more people are pushing the president, as in President Joe Biden, to declare a climate emergency. And he's being criticized by some who are climate activists by saying he's not acting like this is an emergency. What's going on?
Well, it's another tough decision for the president, and you can completely understand the frustration or the energy behind the climate activists, especially just think about the last several days, right? The planet is melting. You have heat waves everywhere, and then you have droughts in part of the South. You have California wildfires. If you do not believe the climate is in crisis, there's nothing I can say to you. I think the country should have and it would welcome a great spirited debate about how much of trying to mitigate it. And a lot of the scientists would tell you we're either too late on a number of fronts or getting to the tipping point on a number of fronts. That's above my intelligence level. But let's have a debate about how much of it should be government, how much of it should be the market, how much of it is individual. I think that would be rich and healthy to have that debate, not just in the United States, but around the world. Instead, we still have the climate deniers. And so the Democrats don't have the votes to do what they wanted to do legislatively. And so you have a lot of people now saying we lost 4 years of this in the Trump administration. Some before that did not think the Obama administration was as aggressive as it should have been, but some things were done. Trump erased some of those, like EPA regulations and the like, clean water and clean air regulations. And so the activists are saying we retreated for the 4 years of Trump. We have to start moving more aggressively. And if you can't pass legislation, use your pen, Mr. President. They're debating this on many other issues as well in the Biden White House with the history of the last several years and with the proof on a very different issue. We were just talking about this when it comes to abortion rights, that you have a very conservative Supreme Court. And so anytime you try to do anything with executive action now, you should spend time to be careful in trying to write it in a way that you hope will sustain and survive the court challenges. Now, I get there's a climate activist out there right now saying move and move more quickly. I get that, and I empathize with it. The pushback you get from the White House is this is very, very complicated anyway, policy-wise. What powers does the president have? And then beyond that, what would happen in the courts? So this is a continuing, I'm going to call it a drama. It's a crisis. And we'll see as we get closer to the election. I do think we're going to see monkeypox action from the administration pretty soon. I believe we will see some climate action from the president very soon. Will it be enough? We'll have that debate when we get it. I do think there are a number of things that are moving their way through the White House policy process. And I know to people who thought it should have come, a month ago or 6 months ago, not quickly enough.
John, speaking of the president, what's the latest on how he's doing, and how do you see this White House dealing with his COVID diagnosis? Obviously, a very different set of circumstances from when President Trump had it.
I think they were very quick and very transparent. I do think the one criticism has been that we have not heard directly from the president's doctor, that he has not taken questions from reporters. Dr. O'Connor, White House officials say, does not view himself as somebody who wants to speak publicly. And so they say he gives a daily memo to the press secretary, and Dr. Jha, the COVID coordinator, has done most of the public speaking. Dr. Fauci was on television a bit today. I guess I get that. I get that. Look, they disclosed the president's, when he was tested positive, they disclosed that right away, and they've given us daily updates. I think Dr. O'Connor, for example, if he doesn't want to be on camera, doesn't want to get a briefing, could have called a few of the medical correspondents into the White House and done something off camera so that they would then come out and report that, we look this guy in the eye and we get it. But they can, the communications piece of it might be a debate among journalists as to whether we should see Dr. O'Connor. But his memo today says the president's feeling much better. His 5 days on Paxlovid is over. He's resuming his exercise routine today. He's still going to stay in isolation because this is day 5. And they're going a little bit beyond the CDC guidelines at the White House, saying they want the president to test negative before he gets back into group settings. So I suspect by the time we get to the end of the week, we're going to see that.
John King, thank you very much. I'm sorry about the Red Sox, John. I know you're...
sometimes when you have valleys, you get peaks. We'll see. When you're as old as I am and you remember the dark, dark days of Boston sports, you just have to remain an optimist, Marjorie. We'll get there.
Okay. Thank you very much, John, as always. Appreciate it.
Take care, guys.
Great to see you. Thank you so much. John King is CNN's chief national correspondent and host of Inside Politics, weekdays at noon. He joins us every Tuesday. Up next, we talked about the T, January 6th, and next we'll hear from you about how you tune out the bad news this summer and tune into some good old-fashioned escapism of the television kind. You're listening to
Compared to white women, black women are more than 3 times as likely to die from pregnancy-related conditions.
People want to intervene even more when maybe the aggressive intervention is actually causing more harm than good.
The new documentary, Aftershock, explores the personal reality behind the alarming number. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you and Heights Crossing, an assisted living community offering residents experiences aimed at promoting independence, inspiring curiosity, and encouraging connection with others. More at heightscrossing.com/enrich. And Gloucester Stage, presenting Grand Horizons, a comedy of marital malaise and the wild, unpredictable, and enduring nature of love. Grand Horizons, July 29th to August 21st. Tickets at gloucesterstage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jared Bowen's in for Jim Browdy. We all know being constantly plugged into the news is not good for us. Sometimes it makes us feel very sad, especially when things feel particularly despairing. Inflation, another COVID variant, monkeypox, climate change, collapsing MBTA, ongoing efforts to overthrow the democracy. You know, you get a little down in the mouth. You know what I mean, Jared?
It happens.
So we want to hear from you. Help us out. When it's all too much to take in, when you get home after a long day at work or on the weekends, what do you tune to tune out the state of the world? Let's keep it light. What are your comfort shows? Something you've already seen before, but you know you'll enjoy for the 100th time. Do you turn off the screens maybe altogether and head out to nature, crack open a book or a beach read? Or do you watch television shows that make you feel good, like The Office or like Seinfeld, or a cooking show like the British Baking Show? Or like me, I do have a bad habit of watching, it's my daughter's fault, I'm going to blame her, to watch the graphic, gruesome TV like Law and Order.
What?
SV. Oh, I know.
That's
it's
what
terrible.
you do to feel better?
No, I don't know why I watch it. I was going to say, I blame my daughter. We've watched like 6 or 7 hours in a row. You know, it's just really, but it's all tied up in a little bow at the end. You know, the crime, and then they have the suspects, and they try to figure out which of the suspects did it, and then they wrap it all up, and they send the bad person off to jail for the rest of their life. It's called Law and Order SVU. Lots of people are hooked on that, Jared. Maybe you're not.
No, not really.
But we want to know what you are hooked in. What is a good thing for you to kind of zone out to at the end of the day? Kind of comfort TV. 877-301-8970 is the number. You can call us or text us at that number, or tweet us at Boss Public Radio. How about you?
Well, I try to find shows that are going to make me feel better. So basically, it's just mindless comedies at this point, although I haven't found anything. I just watched God's Favorite Idiot. It's this new show on Netflix. It's Melissa McCarthy. And I thought, well, Melissa McCarthy
She's
always
funny.
entertains.
She's funny.
But not in this show.
Oh, no?
No, but I watched all of it just because I was hoping for some funny. And then I'm watching Masterpieces Hotel Portofino right now, just because I want to look at something pretty.
Oh, I bet that's beautiful.
And it's set in Italy, and it's very pretty.
Okay, so I should watch that maybe and feel really good. You ever watch the British Baking Show?
I have.
Yeah, I really love that because everything, the places where they bake is this beautiful spot out in the middle of all the green rolling hills, and they have beautiful color-coordinated stoves and counters, and isn't it soothing?
Well, I only watched a couple of episodes recently, and I was struck that it's not like the rest of the competition shows where everybody's mean and they're trying to, you're pulling the spatula out of somebody's back or something like that. It's all very polite and
It is
kind.
very polite. It is very polite. That's why I like it. Some of these cooking shows in the United States are really vicious. But, you know, I'm not the only person that's into Law and Order SVU. Here's a sound from John Mulaney. You ever seen him? He's very funny.
Yeah.
He's got this comedy special, New in Town, in which he shares his thoughts on a show I'm embarrassed to say I've binged watch. It's about murders. Law and Order SVU. Here it is.
You should watch a little preview.
Okay.
That was a specific request from you this morning. I just want to point out.
That's not very soothing, I realize, and it's not very uplifting, but maybe it's one of those things where you think, well, things are bad. It cost me $17 to buy a pack of gum at the supermarket today, but at least I'm not on Law & Order SVU. You know what I mean?
Well, at least you get a little Fran Lebowitz every now and again if you're watching Law & Order.
Exactly.
As the judge,
There's a lot of famous people that go on Law & Order. Yeah, they have cameo roles, or actually real parts on SVU.
That's where Jim is right now. He's filming his cameo in whatever. I always want to say SVU.
SVU, Special Victims Unit. That's what it is. So, Alan on the road in Holliston, what's your comfort TV watching?
Hi, Alan.
Hi there. Well, I have a scientific background, and I really do need something to get away from politics because I'm obsessed with it. But what I like to go to is like the James Webb Telescope and marvel at the pictures and read the descriptions and, the gravitational waves and just all of that stuff.
I'm with you. I don't know anything about the physics involved, but I just love to look at the pictures of the galaxies and the
they're
stars.
Gorgeous, yeah.
Those like little amoeba things kind of floating around out there in space. How many of the planets do you think there are out there that have people on them, Alan?
Well, just that little rice-sized area of the sky that they did a 12-hour exposure on, they saw a trillion galaxies and multiply that by the whole celestial sphere, and you got a trillion square galaxies, and how many hundreds of millions of stars inside of each galaxy, and each star may have some planets. So the answer to that is a number that I can't even describe, right? With how many zeros at the end of it. So, somebody says, is there any intelligent life in the universe other than the Earth? I'd say, the odds are, what are the odds against there not being intelligent life in the universe besides the Earth, right?
I'm with you.
It's really the other way you got to look at it.
I'm with you. They're out there, and they're coming soon.
Is it just coincidence that we see the farthest reaches of space so far at the same time MIT picks up its radio signal in outer space?
That's right. So. Thank you, Alan, for the call. We get a bunch of shows coming in from our texters. 2 words, Shark Week. That's not really soothing, but I can see why people watch it. I've watched that. Schitt's Creek by Sheila. That's from Sheila North Attleboro, season 1. That's SCHITT''S. I want you to know.
Which is hilarious.
It is hilarious. Yeah, we got a bunch of people that are fans of that show. What We Do in the Shadows, I haven't seen that. But Anissa Marlborough says that's very, very funny. Barefoot Contessa, very soothing. Have you seen that?
I have not.
Okay.
The Old Man on Hulu, Big Bang Theory. I actually just watched a few of the episodes of that. I had never seen it before. That was pretty funny.
At The New Old Man on Hulu. I'm mad at Hulu because they're rejecting certain political ads, which I think they should not reject. Lauren from Marblehead, what do you think?
Good afternoon. So on top of all the bad, negative, worldly news, my 91-year-old mom fell, and we have been in the hospital in rehab since the beginning of summer.
Oh.
So our summer was hijacked. So at baseline, I don't own a TV or watch TV, but I have to say, as corny and hokey as it sounds, the Hallmark Channel that I didn't even know existed is awesome. It's happy. There's no bad guys. There's no stress. Nothing bad happens on the Hallmark Channel. And it's honestly gotten us through 5 weeks of being 12-hour days with my mom bedside.
That's a good one. I've watched the Hallmark Channel. That's kind of a little sappy, but I'm with you. That's a pretty good one, Lauren. Thank you very much.
And it's not a crime to own a television.
Oh, our staff is telling us, and many people are emailing in to say that Leave It to Beaver today, Tony Dow, that played the older brother on Leave It to Beaver, he has died. He was the older brother, right?
He was the older brother, Wally.
He played Wally.
Yeah.
At 77. That was a good show, Leave It to Beaver. But it wasn't that good of a show. You know why? Because if your family wasn't like Beaver's family, then you were concerned. You know what I mean? If your mother wasn't in the kitchen in a shirtwaist dress with a 17-inch waist and her high heels and her beautiful hair all done, cooking the dinner, you thought, and your dad wasn't sitting there getting waited on and reading the paper and having his pipe, you thought there was something wrong with you.
Is that how you watch that show, Marjorie?
Well, that's why I like The Simpsons. When The Simpsons came along.
I watched the Brady Bunch, and I didn't wonder why I didn't have 4 other siblings.
Well, really, how many dysfunctional families did we see on TV when we were young? Not many.
Not really any.
Not many, till The Simpsons came along. And then what was the one where they were all yelling and screaming at each other all the time? That was a more real family.
All in the Family?
Married with Children. Thank you very much.
What about All in the Family? There was some dysfunction there, wasn't there?
All in the Family, that's right. Yeah, Archie Bunker.
Yep.
He was rather Neanderthal in his views. And Edith, his wife, she was great. 877-301-8970. Mark from North Providence, what do you think? Mark?
I think I have a bad connection. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to tell us or not? You sounded pretty good.
I'll try later.
You're going to try later? You sound good right now, Mark.
He couldn't hear us.
Oh, he couldn't hear us. Oh,
No.
okay. Well, that takes care of that. 877-301-8970. We're asking you what TV shows you watch for comfort.
You know what? A lot of people are saying All Creatures Great and Small, which
That's
aired
a good
on Masterpiece
one.
too.
That's a good one.
Everybody should watch that show. That is a beautiful show, of course, adapted from the books, and it is just lovely. And talk about having everything wrapped up well in the end. And as somebody, me, who doesn't want to see animals really hurt, most of them survive.
Yeah,
and it's very pretty, English countryside.
Oh, you know what a lot of people are mentioning? The Gilmore Girls. And the old show about politics, The West Wing. And a lot of PBS shows, Nature, Nova, as you said, All Creatures Great and Small, Seinfeld and Friends. Seinfeld has held up pretty well.
You know what else holds up really, really well?
What?
I Love Lucy.
Oh, my God.
I could watch that show over and over and over again.
Where is that? Nickelodeon? Where is I Love Lucy now?
I have no idea. But yeah, you just talk to your remote and it brings it up.
Diane from Fairhaven, thank you for calling.
Hi, guys. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've been binging on the Food Network.
Yeah.
And any of those programs with Ann Burrell especially, Worst Cooks in America, and then the one Tyler Florence does with the food trucks. Now I want to open up a food truck. And I was hoping, I learned to spatchcock a chicken watching the Food Network show and all this other great stuff. And that's where I go to. It's on almost 24/7. In my room on my TV upstairs because my husband doesn't want to watch it. So,
Diane, that's a great one because I do think my kids watch a lot of those food shows and they don't have any idea how to cook. It's amazing.
But it gives you a sense because it's helpful.
Tiffany Faison has been on a million of them,
I
and
know.
she's really
she's
good.
rocking them and winning them.
You have to have an unbelievable breadth of knowledge, right, on those cooking shows.
And be able to work under pressure.
Yeah.
And think fast, and she does all of those things.
And they ask you to cook these bizarre kinds of things you've never heard of, right?
I think, yeah.
But I like the British baking show best because it's much calmer and more soothing.
And no lemony ants in the baking.
I Love Lucy's a great one. I used to love that show.
Vitamita Vegemin, favorite episode ever.
Yeah.
When she gets plastered on her medicine.
Yeah, that's right. And she had the one later on when she was on, it was just the girl, she was a single mom, and she was working for Mr. Mooney at the bank.
The Lucy Show? Was
the
that
Lucy
it?
Show.
I don't think I've seen as much of that.
Yeah, that was a later one, after she and Desi got divorced.
Horrible.
They had to move on to a different show. 877-301-8970. We're talking about Comfort TV. Steve in Watertown, thanks for calling.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
I, too, was going to mention Schitt's Creek. And also, Only Murders in the Building just started up their second season. And I haven't started watching that yet, but that's another good one.
Is that the one with Steve Martin?
And
Martin Short,
Martin Short, and Selena Gomez.
Yeah.
That's an interesting combo.
Yeah, I know. It's an interesting show. It really grabs your attention. And then outdoor activities, just your typical riding bikes and kayaking. But for me personally, I happen to play washboard with the Cajun Zydeco band.
What was that? I didn't hear it. Say it again.
I play a washboard with the Cajun Zydeco band.
You do? Wow.
I do. And if I can throw in a cheap plug, they're called the Squeeze Box Stompers.
Tell us again, the Squeeze Box what?
Squeeze Box Stompers.
I like the name.
Yeah.
It's a good name,
Squeeze Box Stompers.
They're playing this Sunday at a venue down in Rhode Island called Bishop's Castle.
Okay, so we should go down to Rhode Island to the Bishop's Castle and see the Squeeze Box Stompers.
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, you'll have a great time.
Okay, Steve.
In an open-air barn with a lot of dancing.
Really? Okay. Well, thank you very much. That's the Squeeze Bach Stompers. Where, Rhode Island?
He just said Rhode Island.
Okay,
So
okay.
we'll have to Google that. I joked about Jim filming a cameo on Law and Order SVU, and everybody seems to want him to be the murderer for some reason. They all want him put away. At least all our texters do.
Well, this one guy, Dave Nabage, is talking about, he's referencing a story Jim tells all the time about when he lay down in front of the hauler, when they come to haul your truck away. What do you call those things that come and haul your car away?
A tow truck?
Tow truck, thank you very much. He lay down in front of a tow truck, and they finally arrested Jim when he lay down in front of the tow truck, and Jim stands up in the way only Jim can and says, "Officer, you realize I'm a lawyer." To which the officer replied, "No, son, you are a lawyer in handcuffs." They hauled Jim away after he was upset about a parking spot or something like that. He laid down in front of a tow truck. Can you imagine?
I
cannot.
can. Maybe a tree or something, not a parking space.
Yeah, he takes these things.
That's
he
true.
takes these things very seriously.
That's
Rob
true.
from Salem says the best way to relax is to smoke a joint and watch some stand-up comedy, especially George Carlin.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And Lisa in Westwood is rewatching every season of RuPaul's Drag Race and all the spin-offs. That's a pretty good show.
It is. Let's go to Dennis calling from Chelmsford. Hi, Dennis.
Hi. The British Antique Roadshow with Fiona Bryce.
Oh, yeah.
It's always in a beautiful outdoor location in England there, and it's only a half hour, so you don't feel like you're making a big time commitment.
Now, is that different? How is that different from the Antique Roadshow that we have in GBH?
Well, it's always in like this British like old castle.
Yeah.
And it's outdoors, and it's always a beautiful day, and
there's something about Dennis. Thank you for the call. There's something about the British shows with the rolling green hills.
I know, even Broadchurch, which of course is very dark,
I
and it's
love
about murder.
Broadchurch.
Yeah, it's a fantastic show, but it's really pretty to watch because it's set
very
along
pretty.
the beach and it's gorgeous. And
Yeah. Did you watch? How many seasons did you
I
watch?
watched the whole thing.
You did? I
Yep.
thought the first season was great. I wasn't sure if it got...
No, I hung with it.
You did?
Yeah.
That's really good.
It's fun to watch all those shows set somewhere else, like Hawaii 5-0, so you can escape and go to Hawaii. Emily
Yeah.
in Paris. People love to hate Emily in Paris, but it's pretty.
Yeah. There's something about the British accent, too, and the way that they seem to have everything arranged. They always have beautiful china and beautiful silverware. Even when they have 2 cents to rub to their name, they have these elaborate tea things in the afternoon. Do you think they really do that?
I don't know. There's always room for civility, Marjorie.
Oh, my God. Look who's on the line here. Jimmy Tingle.
Oh, Jimmy.
Jimmy Tingle, hi.
Hello, Marjorie. Hello, Jared. Great show today. I just caught you, and I just caught an awesome show the other night that I wanted to plug. It is America Outdoors with comedian Baratunde Thurston.
Yeah?
He's a Boston comic. Yeah, America Outdoors. I think it's produced by PBS. I just happened to see it the other night on television. It was great. And what he was doing an episode with inmates who were out fighting fire, right? So they were like, part of their, their sentence, they had the option to go out and fight fire in California on those huge fires, and they loved it. And they were just feeling so, purposeful and helpful, and it helped with their mindset, and their just attitude changed. It was just an awesome show, very uplifting.
Yeah, so did it calm you down, Jimmy Tingle? Did it calm you down to watch it?
It made me want to fight fire. That's what it made me want to go.
Hey.
It made me want to go to jail and just in my spare time get out, on weekends and go fight some fires.
Okay.
You could do that without going to jail. You know that part, right?
Yeah, I know. But I think the jail part might be more fun.
Thank you, Jimmy Tingle. What a great way to end the show. We have so many people that have video games, things. They watch video games. That helps them. As Lou from Clinton says, you can beat up all the monsters, but anyone is good for escapism. Okay, Jared, we are done.
All right. Well, thank you for listening.
Yeah. Go ahead.
To another edition of Boston Public Radio. You can keep up with us 24/7 by way of our podcast. We are back at the Boston Public Library on Friday with Mayor Michelle Wu. She'll be here from 11 to 12. Jim will be back for that, by the way. Tune in tomorrow.
Will? I didn't know that.
Yeah, yes. Tune in tomorrow for 2 guests on the Reproductive Equity Now. Plus, we'll talk with the woman behind the Commonwealth Shakespeare Company's Much Ado About Nothing, Another Great Escape on Boston Common this summer. It's currently showing there for free. And medical ethicist Art Kaplan and MIT economist John Gruber. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Connolly, Mackenzie Farkas, and Rebecca Tauber, with additional support from Gio Orsino. Our engineer is John LeClaire Parker. Special thanks to Steve Barashi here today, and our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. And also thanks to Rob Fagnet, who's helping us today.
Well, we didn't have to leave a lot of time to advertise Jim's show for tonight because he's not here. But I believe Adam Riley's filling in Greater Boston tonight, and I'm sure he'll have a great lineup at 7 o'clock on GBH. Thanks, Jared.
It's great to be with you.
Okay, I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jared Bowen.
We shall be back tomorrow. Hope you can be with us. And we're going to be back here in the library on Friday with the mayor of the city of Boston. And Jim is going to be back. Jared has just informed me. So that is good to know. Thanks a lot for listening. Hope you have a great day and hope you can tune in tomorrow. Bye.